Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. Now, let's start. Katsuki, age 5, has never had a crush on anyone. Never. He didn't have time for that bullshit. He was going to be a hero for FS sake. He has a really strong quirk, and no one was going to take his attention away from being the most powerful. He was going to be the #1 hero, and no goddamn extra was going to be a distraction. Katsuki has never had a crush on anyone. Or rather, he never had. Move. It's my turn on the swings, Katsuki says, fists clenching at his sides. Why won't this effer get up? The boy's had his fun, so it's time for him to go. Katsuki takes a step closer, getting ready to push the other off the swings. But then he stops. Oh, sorry. Bright viridian eyes looked up at him, wide and cheerful as the boy apologized profusely. Forest green locks were tangled on his head, curling at the ends as they bounced with his movements. His face was dusted a rosy pink, complementing the sprinkling of freckles that dotted his face. In his hands was an old notebook, worn from usage as sheets of paper stuck out at every angle. Here, the boy sprang from his seat, motioning towards the now empty swing. He was quite tall compared to Katsuki, considering the fact that Katsuki had to strain his neck to look the other in the eye. He looked a little bit older, too. The blonde grunted, snatching the chains as he made himself comfortable on the seat. The other boy smiled at him. Why was he still here? Lips curling back as he displayed a row of pearly white teeth. What's your name? The green-haired weirdo asked him, still grinning. Seriously, what was with this guy? Why was he so bright? Katsuki thought he was going to go blind. And why were his ears heating up? Bakugou. Katsuki, he adds his given name as an afterthought, staring at the ground. Why was he telling this guy his name anyway? It's not like they were friends or anything. Katsuki just wanted the goddamn swing, not a whole thing conversation. It's nice to meet you, Bakugou-kun. The boy's smile becomes even wider, reaching the corners of his eyes. He pauses for a moment, tilting his head as he gets lost in thought. After a brief moment, he glances at Katsuki, letting out a nervous giggle. Can I call you Kaken? It's a cute nickname. Katsuki narrows his eyes, frowning as he tries to ignore the burning heat at his cheeks. Cute. Like hell he was. He wasn't cute, he was stronger than anyone else. Was that nerd looking down on him? No way was Katsuki going to let him call him a thing nickname. He sure. What? The boy's eyes twinkle, forest curls bouncing just above his brow. He laughs, voice like bells in the wind as he jumps in his place. He leans in closer to Katsuki's face, not too close, though, and sticks a friendly hand out, waiting to be shaken. Awesome. I'm Midoriya Izuku, but everyone just calls me by my first name. Katsuki's eyes flick down to the nerd's hand, before hesitantly reaching out. Wait. Hold on, he wasn't going to shake some random extra's hand. He did what he wanted, not follow people around. Just who did this kid think he was? Bossing Katsuki around like that. Katsuki took Midoriya's hand. And Fing shook it. What the hell was wrong with him? Their shake lasts for a second before Midoriya pulls back, turning his head away from the blonde. Katsuki looks up, watching the nerd brush himself off. My mom's calling, so I should probably get going, the green-haired weirdo says, giggling. He begins to walk away, but not before he says goodbye. See you, Kaken. Whatever. Katsuki grumbles, keeping himself busy by staring at his shoes. They were green. He starts to swing, kicking his legs into the air to gain speed. All the while, he passes short glances to the other, lasting for the briefest of moments. If anyone saw Katsuki fall off the swings because he was distracted by a mop of forest green, no, they didn't. Katsuki never got distracted. Never. It turned out that Midoriya nerd's mom was close friends with Katsuki's own hag. They had just moved back here, settling in Mustafu after prancing about the entirety of Japan. Once Katsuki's mom found out, she just had to invite them over, and Katsuki sulked the entire time. Well, Maybe not the entire time, he was too busy staring at Midoriya. Not that anyone needed to know. The first meetup had gone smooth enough, so they became a pretty common occurrence. Tonight, it was the Bakugou's turn to visit. The Midoriya's home was cramped, a cozy apartment on the 3rd floor of the building, small enough to comfortably sustain a family of 2. The rooms were carefully decorated, adorned lightly with basic furniture that was deemed appropriate for their living spaces. Pictures ornamented the plain white walls, most of them being pages colored in by the boy of the house. "Mitsuki, I'm so glad you could make it." A gentle voice, soft but firm, called out from the kitchen. Not a moment later, a pleasant-looking woman appeared, dark green hair carefully tucked in a clip at the back of her head. "It's no trouble, Inko. We've been meaning to get out of the house," his hag replies, arms reaching out to embrace the other woman. She looks down at him, voice stern. "Katsuki, say hello." The blonde merely grumbles, avoiding the green-haired woman's Auntie Inko's gaze. Katsuki's eyes flick across the room before finally settling on the 2 women in front of him again. "Where's Zucken?" Katsuki's not sure when he started calling Midoriya that stupid name, but he hasn't stopped using it. Maybe it was on the older boy's insistence, who, by the way, was 2 years older than him, or maybe it was his own will. Katsuki didn't know. Midoriya never seemed to mind, so the nickname stayed. No, it was not because Zucken lit up every time Katsuki called him. No. Katsuki wanted to call him that. He did whatever the hell he wanted. "He should be in his room," Auntie Inko smiled, pointing to a small hallway. "It's the one with the All Might sign. You can't miss it." Katsuki grunts, staring at the floor as he walks towards the room. Sure enough, the door is embellished with an All Might sign, big and obnoxious as it displays a name. Izuku. He doesn't bother knocking because why does he need to? And turns the handle, taking in the view of the room. All Might. Every inch of his room is covered in All Might. Zucken was a fanboy obviously, with figurines lined up everywhere. The walls were covered in posters, ones that depicted the current number 1 during all of his eras. Besides the occasional other heroes, Zucken's room was drowning in a swirl of red, blue, and yellow, the 3 telltale colors of the hero. Katsuki liked it. Zucken was in the center of the mess. He was hunched over his desk, notebook wide open as he toiled with a screwdriver. Metal clinked loudly, clashing every few seconds while the boy fixed it in place. Katsuki trudged over, placing his hands on the table as he peeked over the wood. Zucken had his tongue out, eyebrows furrowed in concentration as sweat beaded at his forehead. "What's that?" Katsuki points a finger, causing Zucken to jump in his seat. The blonde snorts. "Kaken. Don't sneak up on me like that," the green-haired boy stutters, eyes wide. He shakes his head and blinks, breathing out to calm down. Katsuki shrugs, eyes shifting to the metal. "What's that?" he repeats, still pointing. "Well, it's a support item I'm working on." Zucken sighs, ruffling Katsuki's hair. "No, he doesn't blush at this, no Fing Wei. It's inspired by you, actually." Katsuki tilts his head in interest, brushing the other's hand away as he stands proudly. "Beat that, shitty extras. I inspired a big kid." Zucken continues, picking up a piece of metal. A capsule, no larger than a marble, sat comfortably in his palm. Of course, it's still the making, but that's expected. And it's much smaller than the real deal, 'cause it's a prototype. Also, my mom probably wouldn't like things blowing up, so yeah. He hands it to Katsuki, fingers cool and gentle as he places the metal in the blonde's hands. Katsuki stares, watching the capsule roll in his palm, glinting in the light. "As I said, it was kinda designed after you. Your quirk is super cool, you know that, Kaken. It's all thanks to your sweat, really, which is really similar to nitroglycerine. When enough of your sweat is collected, your hands act like lighters, and that causes the explosion. Anyways, I thought about how useful something like your sweat could be. I know it sounds wrong, but hear me out. If enough of a substance like your sweat is stored in one of those," he says, pointing to the capsule in Katsuki's hands, "it could make for a really cool quirk-related bomb. All you need to do is activate it with heat or a small explosion, and boom." Zucken laughs, wriggling his fingers. He looks at Katsuki, smiling wide. "Would you like to try it out, Kaken?" Katsuki nods, letting 𝙎𝙬 pick the item up. He watches as the green-haired boy unscrews the top, revealing an empty bowl. Now, could you drop some of your sweat in there? It sounds weird, I know, but, anyway. Just put a little bit, we don't want any big explosions. Katsuki obliges, letting some sweat drip off his clammy hands. Izuku grins, closing the capsule once again. He shakes it, checking if it's tight, then nods. Alright, when I throw this in this air, I want you to blast a tiny explosion towards it. Can you do that? Remember, it needs to be really small. Of course I can. Who the hell do you think I am? Katsuki yells as he rolls his eyes, earning a soft chuckle from the older boy. Great. Get ready, now, 𝙎𝙬 replies, waiting a second before tossing the capsule into the air. Katsuki watches it closely, feeling his hands heat up as sweat collects at his palms. He waits for the spark to ignite, light crackling at his fingertips as he fires, a small, streamlined explosion at the capsule. 𝙎𝙬 chews on his nails, waiting anxiously. A short moment passes before the capsule propels forward, hissing quietly as the chemicals inside heat up. Then, with a hushed boom, it blows up in their faces, light and heat exploding from the epic enter. It works! 𝙎𝙬 leaps from his seat, cheering loudly as he claps his hands. He ruffles Katsuki's hair once again in celebration, whooping as his cheeks flush in excitement. You did amazing, Kakin. Now, I'm wondering if we can somehow make the chemicals more concentrated because that would lead to a bigger explosion, and Katsuki tunes out the rest of his rambling, instead opting to stare at the nerd. The blonde feels his face heat up, mouth left slightly ajar as he ogles at Izuku, gazing intently at the way the other taps his chin. Wow. 𝙎𝙬 is smart. 𝙎𝙬 is really smart. Katsuki didn't doubt it for a second. Of course 𝙎𝙬 was accepted into UA. There was no way in hell he wouldn't be. If that was the case, then those DMN examiners need to get their shitty eyes checked. It was a cloudy Saturday when the news came in. 𝙎𝙬 had received a letter, and Katsuki was beside him the entire time. The message came in a hologram, faint blue light glowing in the dark living room. The man presented had an excavation claw around his head, and sounded tired. Really tired. Welcome to you. Midoriya Izuku, he finishes, giving a soft smile before the light dims. 𝙎𝙬 just sits there, mouth wide open as his eyes nearly pop out of his sockets. And then comes the waterworks. Katsuki looks up at the other boy, who now has a hand clamped over his lips. Large beads of tears pool at his waterline, threatening to cascade down his face. With a wobbly sigh, he lets out a sob, and Katsuki whoops. Did you hear that? I got in. I got accepted into UA's support course. Obviously, nerd. That was a give-in. Katsuki rolls his eyes, placing a hand on his shoulder. 𝙎𝙬 immediately falls in, squeezing the blonde in a tight hug. No, Katsuki doesn't look at the well-developed muscles on Izuku's arm. Not at all. Auntie Inko is crying behind them, messily wiping away tears with a tissue. She smiles, walking into the kitchen. This calls for a celebration. I'll make spicy katsudon for dinner, she says, already peering into the fridge. 𝙎𝙬 releases Katsuki from his grip before cheering. Bright viridian eyes meet his ruby ones, joyous and swollen from crying. Izuku snickers, ruffling Katsuki's blonde spikes. Well then, now that I've been accepted into Japan's most prestigious hero academy, I expect to see you there. 𝙎𝙬 laughs, his grin widening. See you there in a few years, Kakin. Katsuki smirks back, closing his eyes. See you, nerd. Alright, brats, settle down. The caterpillar man, Aizawa, says from the front of the room. The extras around him quiet down, and Katsuki slumps in his seat. There was no doubt whatsoever that he would pass the entrance exam. In fact, he had placed first with 77 points in total. 𝙎𝙬 had cheered for him once he received his acceptance letter, embracing the angry blonde in one of his bone-crushing hugs. Katsuki didn't actually mind being crushed by Izuku's arms, not that anyone needed to think no, thank you very much. So now here Katsuki was, leaned back in seat number 17 of Class 1A, right? Then, Aizawa grumbles, still half asleep. UA has started a new program where third-year support students assist those in the hero course. Each class has been assigned one student that will stay for the entirety of the school year, so please be on your best behavior. The man offers a glare to each student, and the extra behind Katsuki shudders. Aizawa turns to face the door, nodded his head as he stifles a yawn. Come in. A mop of forest green catches Katsuki's eye, messy curls tied back in a short ponytail. A well-built body accompanies a heavily tanned face, sprinkled with prominent freckles. Two emerald eyes twinkle with excitement, and a bright smile presents pearly white teeth. Why the F does he look so good in a uniform? Katsuki places his hands at the side of his head in a feeble attempt to cover his ears that were reddening rapidly. He casts a quick glance to his right, dismayed but not surprised to find extras eyeing the boy at the front of the room. Something boils inside him when he hears Pikachu mutter, "Hot," under his breath, and Katsuki swears that low whistle was from tape face. Yeah, he had names for people already. What the F about it? His attention turns back to the front of the room, though his scowl is far from gone. Zucken gives a friendly wave to the class, voice bright and chipper. Hi, Class 1A. I'm Midoriya Izuku, your support student this year. My goal this year is to help you improve as heroes, and that means I'll be accompanying you all quite a bit. With that said, please don't feel intimidated to ask me any questions. Izuku winks and several people shift in their seats, Katsuki included. I really hope that we can get along, and Zucken's eyes lock with his, Viridian eyes shimmering in recognition. The older boy's grin becomes even wider, which should be physically impossible, and Katsuki can feel the blush spreading across his face as he tries to ignore the looks he was getting. Kaken. You're here. In 1A. Oh. Hey, Zucken, Katsuki grumbles, staring at his desk. This was fine. This was perfectly fine. He was in U. For a reason, that being because he was going to be the number one hero. Not even a nerd like Zucken was going to deter him from his goal. And what DMN difference did it make anyway? They saw each other on a regular basis. This wasn't going to be any different. Katsuki was going to be fine. Great even. Zucken's blinding white smile didn't help his case. Not one thing bit. Katsuki's train of thought came to a screeching halt by way of a surprised shriek. The blonde shifts his head slightly, groaning when he sees the source of the sound. Pikachu is halfway out of his seat, hands slammed on his desk as he gapes in surprise. His gaze shifts quickly, eyes flicking between Katsuki and Izuku as he fruitlessly tries to make a connection. Here. You guys know each other. But, how? It's only, like, the second day of school. Did he not know that childhood friends were a thing? Is he being serious? Actually, Kaken and I have been friends since we were little. Zucken laughs, flushed cheeks bunching up on either side of his face. His hair tousled a bit, green curls bouncing against his forehead. We practically grew up together, hence the cute nicknames. Cute. Katsuki stiffened at that, already aware of the sly smirk Pikachu was shooting him. He sent a glare back, causing the little effer to sit back down, eyes roaming the room as he looked at anywhere but Katsuki. Keep it that way. Any other questions? Zucken asks, smiling as he inspects the class. A hand shoots up, and Katsuki can see it belongs to that extra with the gravity quirk. Midoriya-senpai, she starts, voice filled with curiosity. Since you're in the support course, what kind of quirk do you have? It must be related to inventing or something, right? Katsuki scared in a breath, heart beating just a tad faster. Zucken hasn't had a good past with questions like these, being quirkless and all. In fact, he hasn't had a good experience with people in general. The nerd being non-confrontational made it worse. Katsuki was always the one standing up for the boy, throwing himself headfirst into a fight without so much of a second thought. Izuku had always asked him to stand back, to ignore the threats on his behalf, but how the F could Katsuki? The nerd was too stubborn to admit that he was hurt, so it was up to him to teach those F'ers a lesson. The scoldings he got from Zucken were worth every hit. If any of these shitty hero extras had anything to say about Zucken, they were going to regret it. About that, Zucken let out a nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. He always did that when he was anxious or flattered, and Katsuki found it sort of endearing. No, he didn't. Absolutely not. Not a chance. At all. I'm quirkless. Several people gasped, murmurs of surprise littering the room. Katsuki narrowed his eyes, frowning. I've got the double joint in my toe and everything, 𝙎𝙮 laughed jokingly. It doesn't really bother me, though, because I know that's not what defines me. Every person is special in their own way, whether they have special abilities or not. No one's worth is measured up to what kind of quirk they have or lack. Don't any of you dare forget that. The tension in the room relaxes at those words, with 𝙎𝙮 grinning brightly once more. He calls on another extra, the one with several arms. Aizawa-sensei said that you'd be with us all year. Do you know if that'll be true for the rest of our time at UA? 𝙎𝙮 tilts his head to the side, picking at his lips in concentration. Katsuki knew that look anywhere, as the green-haired boy would wear it any time the gears were turning in his head. After a moment, he looks back at the class, brows still furrowed. I'm not sure. As you all know, I'm in my 3rd year, meaning this will be my last year at UA. On top of that, this whole hero course support program is still in the testing stages, so nothing is set in stone. That's a good question, though maybe ask Aizawa-sensei about that. 𝙎𝙮 claps his hands together, turning his attention to the yellow sleeping bag on the ground. As if on cue, the man inside wakes up, dusting himself off as he stands. He stifles a yawn before checking the time, clearing his throat as he watches the class with one eye open. I think that's enough questions for now. You can ask Midoriya later, as he'll be joining you for the training exercise in the afternoon. At the moment, he needs to be getting back to his class, and so do we. Katsuki rolls his eyes at the collective groan the class breathes out. 𝙎𝙮 giggles again, nodding as he agrees with Aizawa. He starts for the door, straightening out his uniform before waving to the class, a wide smile plastered on his face. Bye Class 1A. Bye Kaken. Katsuki grunts back, looking away because 𝙎𝙮 singled him out. He called out his name specifically, acknowledging him. Obviously, it was because the nerd didn't know anyone else's name, but F it, Katsuki can believe whatever the hell he wants to. He's on a nickname basis with me, you extras. Beat that. The thought makes him smirk. Just a bit. Yo. Bakugou. DMN it. Katsuki was here at you. To learn how to be a pro hero. Instead, he's stuck with 4 extras that won't stop following him around. Just his fing luck. The blonde turned his head, dismayed to find the red-headed boy making himself comfortable. Tapeface and Pikachu followed suit, already stuffing their faces with food. The girl with the acid quirk came last, seating herself across from him. Katsuki frowned. What the hell do you want? It was more of a statement than a question, an indication that they weren't welcomed. Katsuki could only hope they took the fing hint. They didn't. Nothing really, Pikachu said through a full mouth, waving his utensils in the air. We just wanted to hang out with you. Yeah, you seem cool, added Pinky the acid girl, halfway out of her seat as she exclaimed, loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. I'm just tagging along, Tapeface mumbled through a slurp of noodles. Katsuki picked at his rice with his chopsticks, grumbling to himself. All he wanted was to eat in relative peace, but any chance he had was now long gone. He doubted that he'd have his quiet again, because now the F-ers were yelling across the table, practically destroying his ears. They did more damage than his own DMN quirk, and that was saying something. Katsuki groaned again. If he didn't have a headache by the end of lunch, he'd be surprised. Anyway, this morning was interesting, the red-haired boy said, jabbing Katsuki with his elbow. He grinned, revealing teeth that looked like they belonged to a shark. He looked ridiculous, especially with his hair done like that. Seriously, who the F styles their hair like a hedgehog's back? Yeah, it was, especially with that support student. Who knew that Bakugou here knew him? The living battery butted in, smirking as he looked at Katsuki. Kaminari, you do know that childhood friends are a thing, right? Pikachu scoffs, defending himself with a weak excuse. The table bursts into a fit of snickers, picking fun at the electric blonde. Katsuki rolls his eyes. In all seriousness, though, Midoriya-senpai seems pretty chill, Tapeface says, stifling his laughter. The others agree, and for once, they are calm. Not to mention his hot, Pikachu adds, causing Katsuki to side-eye him. What? He's definitely got looks, Pinky interjects, propping an elbow up on the table. Right. Did you see how good he looked in that uniform? Tape Face said, now fully in the conversation, and yes, Katsuki did see not that he was going to tell these shitty extras anything. I'm telling you, he's got to be built. Katsuki's eye twitches. Maybe we shouldn't talk about our upperclassman like that. Shitty Hair lets out an anxious chuckle, scratching the side of his face. It's a little rude, don't you think? Not very manly, if you ask me. Tape Face snorts, practically inhaling a bite of his food. He points his chopsticks at the redhead, eyes narrowing in accusation. Kirishima, you literally have no right in saying that. I saw you eyeing him like full-on checking him out. Like you're any better, Sero, Shitty Hair retorts, pointing a finger back at him. Everyone knows that you were the one that whistled. Katsuki spoke way too soon about them being calm. Relax, Kirishima, we're just admiring him. Right, Bakugou? The blonde looked up from his rice, glaring. Excuse me. Oh come on, Kaken, Kaminari sneered, emphasizing the nickname. You weren't very good at hiding that blush, you know. Katsuki was fuming. I didn't blush, Pikachu. Mind your own goddamn business. The BSA had the audacity to wave him off. Who the hell did he think he was? Sniggering as he held in a bout of laughter. Don't kid yourself, dude. It's okay to admit you like our upperclassmen. You have exactly 3 seconds to stop talking. Katsuki's voice was low, almost a growl as he stared at the electric blonde. The other three were laughing now, weakly attempting to smother their chortles, leaning over their stomachs with hands clasped to their mouths. Denial, Pinky tittered, muttering under her breath. It took Katsuki all of his willpower not to combust right there. Why? Simple, because Zucken was heading their way. At their table. Normally, Katsuki would ecstatic not that he would let anyone know that. It wasn't their DMN business, but not right now. Not when these shitty extras were acting like this. Katsuki didn't group himself in with them, but it was embarrassing nonetheless. Kaken! Zucken called out, his walk turning into a light jog as he waved at him. The green-haired boy grinned when he reached their table, placing a hand on the cool surface. He looked around, winking as he noticed the others. And company it seems. He's not giving you too much trouble, right? Zucken joked, eyes twinkling. Not at all, Midoriya-senpai. We were just, talking, Pinky exclaims, practically yelling. Scream a little louder, will you? I'm sure the whole cafeteria would like to hear our conversation. Katsuki shouts back, halfway out of his seat. Something taps his shoulder, and the blonde whips his head around to find Zucken's hand pressing gently but firmly, because goddamn his grip is strong down on him. Katsuki reluctantly sits back in his seat, earning him a snicker from Shitty Hair. He glares back, silencing the redhead. Talking? About what? Zucken tilts his head to the side, voice high as he asks curiously. It's nothing, Katsuki mumbles, ears beginning to heat up because Zucken was so close. F his luck, honestly. He was being humiliated in front of shitty extras that certainly won't drop the subject. The others at the table are doing a poor job of holding in their amusement, and Pikachu doesn't even try. Zucken looks at him in a way Katsuki can't describe, shrugging only a moment later. He pushes over a little box, still warm as heat radiated off of it. By the looks of it, there was food inside. Anyway, the main reason I came over here was to give that to you, Zucken says, his usual smile fixed back into place. Actually, my mom was the one who wanted me to give you that, even though I told her that you'd have food today. He sighs in mock annoyance, waving his arms about. But no, don't listen to Izuku. The boy smiles awkwardly, shyness overtaking his sarcasm. Anyway, that's for you. It's your favorite food, Zucken laughs, ruffling Katsuki's hair as he stood up, which the blonde didn't mind, of course. He liked it when Zucken did that again, no one needed to know that. Mido, what are you doing? We aren't going to wait for you, you know. A strong voice calls out, causing Zucken to jump. Just a second, the green-haired boy shouted back, fixing his tie. He turned back to the table, waving his goodbyes. I'll see you guys later, okay? Don't forget to wear your commissioned hero costumes to ground beta. Mido! Mirio-kun, I said I was coming. Zucken shouted, running to the other boy as he called out. Katsuki looked down at the box, slightly smiling. No, he wasn't smiling as he patted his hair back in place. That moment of peace was over sooner than Katsuki liked. What were you saying about our upperclassmen? Pikachu giggled, doubling over in pain as shitty hair elbowed him. Shut the F up. Okay, Kakin. Katsuki always guessed right. He had a headache. The lesson at Ground Beta with All Might was exhausting. They were split up into teams of 2, and each team was labeled as either hero or villain. Any person with common sense would know that this was a combat and wits exercise, with the heroes trying to secure the weapon the villains held hostage. Katsuki had no doubt that he would win. He always won. He was partnered with that mind-F kid, the one with the hypnosis quirk. It was impressive, really, though Katsuki would never say it out loud, how it could be triggered by a verbal response. It was a close match. As the villains, it was Katsuki and mind-F's job to make sure the heroes couldn't reach the weapon, and that's just what they did. The blonde rushed in, not waiting a second to hunt his opponents down. Mind-F had agreed to stay back, guarding the floor where the weapon was kept. Exhilarating was the first word that had come to Katsuki's mind. He'd found glasses 3 minutes in, and the two immediately engaged in combat. It was shocking, really, how fast the blue-haired boy was, but Katsuki guessed that's what happened when someone had literal engines sticking out of their legs. The fight had ended when Katsuki landed a direct hit on the other, rendering him temporarily immobile. He made quick work of glasses, swiftly tying the capture tape around him before smirking in victory. The buzzer rang only mere moments later, indicating that mind-F had gotten floaty, as well. All in all, a success. Brilliantly done, Zucken had cheered once the 4 had made their way out of the building. I'm impressed by all of you. Katsuki didn't miss the way the other 3 mind-F, glasses, and floaty hid their faces at the compliment. The rest of the lesson had gone in a blur, with All Might and Zucken critiquing after each match, pointing out what they did well and bringing up the flaws in their fighting. Katsuki also saw the way the nerd's eyes lit up as he stood next to the hero he was All Might's biggest fan. After all, seeing Zucken fanboy was endearing, and if anyone was wondering, no, Katsuki didn't smile at that. Or blush. F off. By the end of the lesson, the entirety of the class was exhausted. Could anyone blame them though? They were pit against each other, encouraged to fight with their all. It took energy, goddammit. A chipper voice interrupted Katsuki's thoughts. Fantastic job, everyone. Zucken exclaimed, blowing a curl of hair out of his face. He offered a smile, and Katsuki took it gratefully. No, he didn't. The green-haired boy looked down at his notes, muttering something before turning to All Might. The hero nodded his head and Zucken turned back, tapping the end of his pencil to his cheek. Now then, what was the biggest takeaway from this exercise? He asked, eyeing the students with care, waiting patiently for a volunteer. The boy with split hair raised his hand, to which Zucken nodded. I believe that the purpose of the lesson today was to teach us to be observant of our surroundings, Icy Hot said, his expression unreadable. Zucken closed his notes and grinned, tapping his chest before pointing out to the boy. Bullseye, he exclaimed, now turning to speak to the entire class. As heroes, it's your job to take care of the threat as efficiently as possible. That means you need to really analyze your surroundings in order to determine the best way to utilize your quirk, Zucken said, pausing to take a breath before continuing. While many of you took time to come up with a plan, almost everyone either rushed in or became reckless, which is a fatal mistake no one should make. All Might nodded his head, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Young Midoriya is right. Being a hero requires a cool head, and you can't have that if your body moves before your brain. We'll be working on that in future classes, though, so no need to fret. Zucken turns back to face the class, clapping his hands together. Well then, unless All Might has something else planned for you all, he looks at the hero before he carries on, this would be the end of class. We'll be having costume redesigns later this week, so please make sure you know where the support department is located. Zucken finishes, ending with a small giggle which Katsuki definitely didn't find cute, not at all. He couldn't say the same for the extras in his class, though. Change out of your costumes, 1A, and make sure to get some rest, All Might calls out, hands at his hips. See you all later this week. 𝙎𝙮 laughs, winking to the class as he turns to talk to the number one hero. Katsuki heads back to the locker rooms, groaning to himself as he hears the mutterings of his classmates, no doubt talking about 𝙎𝙮's gesture. They haven't even known him for a day and they were already fawning over him. Thing brilliant. Although, Katsuki didn't have any right in thinking that when he had done the exact same thing for years now. He was just better at hiding it than those extras. 𝙎𝙮 was class 1 as support student. This year was going to be thing interesting. Katsuki knew it. Eijirou was a morning person, that much he could admit. He preferred getting up bright and early, jumping out of bed as soon as his alarm rang, always priding himself in starting his day as quickly as possible. He was never tired in the quiet hours of the morning, never groggy or sluggish when he fixed his hair or brushed his teeth. After all, it was a manly thing to do, having a stable morning routine. Yes, Eijirou was a morning person, and he took pride in that. Always showing up to school with the brightest of smiles, always ready for the day's activities. That's just how he was, and Eijirou liked it that way. The red-haired boy was not at all prepared for costume redesigns, however. It was a typical school day, near the end of the week. 1A buzzed with a low hum as students filed in, stifling yawns as they slumped into their seats. Eijirou relaxed into his chair, chuckling to himself as he leaned over his desk to greet a snoring Kaminari. Mina and Sero were already on the case, snorting as they presumably know, most definitely doodled on the electric blonde's face. Bakugou isolated himself from them, crossing his arms in an irritated manner. When was he not? Foot tapping impatiently under his desk. Yep, just a normal day in the hero course. About time all of you settled down. Aizawa walked, squirmed into the room. Seriously, what appeal did that sleeping bag have? A hush fell over the class, everyone's full attention on the man at the front. Even Kaminari was awake, sitting straight in his seat, blissfully unaware of the markings on his face. What they were, Eijirou had no clue. He sat behind the blonde, after all. Your timing's getting better, Aizawa mumbled as he crawled out of the bag, dusting himself off as he stood to face the class. Let's get started then, shall we? As everyone should know, Midoriya had mentioned earlier that costume redesigns would be held sometime this week. Since your outfits are a crucial part of your hero work and image, he will be making adjustments to several costumes, the man mused, lost in thought before he deadpanned. By the looks of it, all of you would do well with redesigns. Now, what hell was that supposed to mean? Eijirou wasn't so sure he wanted to know. I'll be sending you off individually, now, Aizawa said, clearing his throat as he examined the room. Once you are done with measurements or whatever Midoriya has planned for you, you are to return to this room immediately, understood? He received a wordless reply in a flurry of fervent nods from each student. I expect all of you to know where the support department is located, yes? Splendid. Kirishima, you're up first. Eijirou stands from his seat, flattening his uniform as he heads out the door. He wasn't in the first seat, but the boy had quickly learned that Aizawa followed his own rules, no questions asked. It was best not to ask, anyway. It was loud. Eijirou wasn't surprised. The support department had a reputation for being noisy, and really, it made sense. It was filled with talented students, each tinkering away on projects almost too large for them to handle. They had an ambition that matched the hero core students, that's for sure. The warehouse, studio, tech lab, whatever it was buzzing with excitement. Drills hummed noisily as metal clashed together, the clamorous chatter of students echoing throughout the room. Kids from each year were testing out their inventions, most of them crashing into walls from failed experiments. Eijirou flinched as a rocket. Boot whizzed past him, gaining a rushed apology from a girl with messy pink hair. It was absolute chaos. The most interesting thing, though, was the mop of green that caught Eijirou's eye. Kirishima-kun. You're here. Midoriya called out, waving to him. Eijirou smiled back, walking over to the table where the greenette was working. The third year's workspace was a mess, sheets of paper were spread out across the table, and screws and scraps of metal were scattered on top. A blueprint of Eijirou's hero costume was set at the center, and notes in Midoriya's rushed handwriting were scribbled across. How are you today? The older boy picked up a stool and set it aside, gesturing for Eijirou to step into the cleared space. Pretty good, Eijirou laughed sheepishly, scratching the back of his neck. His day had been good, and it just got better. It wasn't that Kaminari was lying when he said that Midoriya was attractive, it's just that the red-haired boy didn't pay much attention. Sure, he might have checked the upperclassman out when he was introduced to 1A, but Eijirou didn't really bother looking too hard, and no, Sero, he most definitely did not check Midoriya out. F you. But now, upon a closer inspection, it was clear why Bakugou was constantly blushing around the greenette. Midoriya was the definition of pretty boy. The way his forest green curls framed his tanned face was nothing short of gorgeous. Not to mention that the dimples that dented his cheeks or the dusting of freckles across a permanent rosy blush made the redhead's heart skip a beat. And Eijirou wasn't blind, he couldn't ignore Midoriya's broad shoulders and athletic build, very manly, if Eijirou did say so himself, or the way he carried himself with confidence and Midoriya lifted a massive metal bar over his head, arms flexed, and everything, and tossed it aside like it was nothing. Eijirou gulped. That was unnecessarily hot. Sorry about the mess, the green-haired boy laughed, brushing hair out of his face. He turned to face Eijirou, smiling gently. Let's get started then, yeah. Yeah? Eijirou murmured, still recovering from the moment before. Great, the greenette exclaimed, jotting more notes down on the blueprint. So, about your costume. There weren't too many problems with it, but I did decide to remove that cape around your waist. Midoriya pointed to the loose fabric drawn on the paper, scribbling it out. I think removing those shock absorbers around your shoulders would also be a good idea because they seem to hinder your movement during combat. Eijirou nods, impressed by how perceptive his upperclassman was. That was a given, though. He was a support student, after all. Midoriya continues, tapping a pencil to his cheek. Placing those absorbers around your wrists would be a better idea, I think. I'm also a little concerned about your exposed chest, so adding a shock-absorbing tank to your costume would also be beneficial. He pauses for a moment before stuttering out, not that I don't think you can't protect yourself, because you totally can, especially with a quirk like that. It's just better to have extra protection beforehand, you know. Eijirou nods and smiles, ignoring his rapidly heating face. Don't sweat it, Midoriya-senpai. You're the expert here, you know better than me. He shoots the older boy a reassuring grin, and Midoriya laughs. Well then, since that's out of the way, there's one more thing I'd like to check before I send you on your way. The greenette winks, and damn it, Eijirou doesn't know what to do with that gesture. Can you harden yourself for me? Here. What? Eijirou blinks, now fully red. Midoriya must have noticed the implication of his words because he was blushing. Harden F. That's not helping Eijirou's case at all. OSHT, and not like that. I meant to use your quirk. Can you activate your quirk? I'm so sorry, Kirishima-kun. This is so embarrassing. The third year flushed, stuttering out several apologies. Okay, Eijirou mutters, lifting an arm to use his quirk. His skin became rigid, and Midoriya gasped. Fascinating, the greenette murmurs, eyes wide with wonder. Eijirou can't help but smirk at the fact that a gorgeous boy was ogling at his arm. Midoriya stands and walks over to him, notepad in hand as he scribbles notes. Do you mind if I touch your arm? I don't want to make you uncomfortable, the third year says, stalling for a second. No, Eijirou didn't mind, absolutely not. The redhead nods and Midoriya smiles. Eijirou doesn't know what to make of this situation, because there is a very gorgeous boy with a very strong grip patting his arm. Said gorgeous boy is also complimenting him, and if Eijirou doesn't get his mind out of the gutter right now, your quirk is amazing, Kirishima-kun. Midoriya says, interrupting Eijirou's train of thought, and thank God for that. I'm not entirely sure how, but it looks like the keratin proteins in your skin rearrange themselves in a firmer formation. As for how sturdy you are while your quirk is active, I'd say you're as strong as steel. The green stops to catch his breath before continuing, I have so many more questions for you, you'll definitely have to come back and visit. Well, the support department is way more lively than Aizawa's classes, Eijirou jokes, slightly disappointed as Midoriya lets go of his arm. The latter laughs, tucking a pencil behind his ear. As much as I agree with you, I don't think either of us wants to deal with his wrath. the third replies, hiding his giggles behind a coy smile. So, off you go. Send Kaminari my way. Will do. Eijirou waves as he leaves, relaxing his shoulders as a heavy blush paints his face, the image of emerald eyes and strong arms failing to leave his thoughts. Maybe he shouldn't have teased Bakugou about his obvious crush. Scratch that, he definitely shouldn't have done that. Some people were born with the blessing of being attractive. That much was obvious to Denki. And on its own, that's a good thing, great even. Except when it's not. Like right now, when Denki was about to be measured by a third-year support student. A hot, insanely hot, third-year support student. Goddammit. Rewind to 9 minutes and 37 seconds ago. Denki was on his 8th wipe, desperately trying to rub the ink off his skin. Apparently, two little 𝙎𝙧𝙮 had decided that it was a wonderful idea to use his face as their canvas while he was not sleeping. Could you believe it? His face. To make matters worse, their medium of choice was a Fing permanent marker, which left Denki's cheeks all sore and red and smudged with ink that won't come off. It was a fantastic way to start his day, really. That's when Kirishima had walked through the door, face so red that it looked like he had fallen into a bucket of paint. Normally, Denki would be on the ground, laughing at his friend's flustered situation because honestly, Kirishima looked so lost, and that was hilarious, but he had his own problems to deal with. Ashido, however, made it very apparent that she found Kirishima's embarrassing state entertaining, given that she was making no effort whatsoever to hide her snickers. Kaminari, you're needed next, Kirishima says, voice soft as he was obviously in a daze. He walks robotically to his seat, sitting down like a well-oiled machine, very clearly rethinking his life's decisions. Denki could see a prominent blush on the redhead's cheeks, and if that wasn't heat radiating off his friend, he didn't know what it was. Kirishima, you good, dude? Denki chuckles nervously, slightly concerned at how red his friend was getting. Yeah, bro, I'm great. Kirishima replies, obviously not great. The guy looked like he was about to go into cardiac arrest for FS sake. Don't worry about me, you should probably go though. Denki raised an eyebrow but agreed, standing up from his seat before straightening out his uniform. Kirishima offers a strained smile, still very flustered, and the electric blonde simply shrugs in return. Because whatever his friend was going through, it wasn't very characteristic of him. Denki was going to get to the bottom of this. Denki got to the bottom of it, but not before he noticed a crucial thing about Midoriya. The older boy was tall. Like, really tall. How hadn't he noticed this earlier? Denki had to tilt his head just to make eye contact with him, and honestly, thank the gods for the view. Kaminari-kun. Hey! Midoriya turned his head, greeting him with a blinding smile. The boy ran his fingers through his hair, gathering curly bangs in the palm of his right hand. With the other, he removed the hairband between his lips and swiftly tied off his locks of green with a firm tug. Denki gulped because holy 𝙎𝙧𝙮, he really shouldn't have found that attractive. Yo, Denki says, kicking himself mentally for the way his voice squeaked. I take it that Kirishima-kun made it back all right. Yeah, he did. Denki holds in a snicker because he shouldn't be laughing. His red-haired friend had every right to look like a flaming tomato. The electric blonde looks down at Midoriya's workbench, inspecting the messy blueprint of his costume. Denki's eyes flicker back up to the third year, a small smirk tugging at his lips. So, what am I in for? He asks, hesitantly adding a wink after his words. And no, Denki wasn't breaking any school ground rules, at least, none that he knew of. Friendly flirting was fine. It's not like he was going to regret it or anything, right? Enthusiastic, aren't we? Midoriya laughs, walking over to where Denki was standing. Oh, no. Maybe he shouldn't have initiated flirting. The greenette points to the blueprint, picking up a pencil as he does so. Well, I've made a few adjustments to your costume, so that should be our priority, he says, and the third year's eyes glimmer with something Denki can't quite put his tongue on. For starters, I think replacing the jacket with a shock-resistant turtleneck or shirt would be an improvement, considering the fact that it would help prevent you from short-circuiting, Midoriya explains, tapping the pencil to his cheek. On top of that, I think cargo briefs would fit your costume better since I do have plans for giving you support items. Your quirk is super versatile, and I think it could reach its fullest potential if we gave you a few resources to work with. Since your quirk revolves around electricity, having metal support items would be really beneficial. That's why I added fingerless gloves with extendable copper rods, since that metal is such an amazing conductor. SHD, Midoriya was hot and smart. Denki should just say he was in love and leave he was way beyond the point of denial. That's smart, Denki says, and once again, he states the obvious. Dumbass. Well, it's kind of my job. Midoriya rubs the back of his neck, a slight pink dusting his gorgeous face. But I'll take the compliment. The third year rises from his seat, opening a small drawer before pulling out a measuring tape. Before I let you go, there is something I'd like you to do for me. Now, why did Midoriya have to say it like that? F his train of thought, honestly. Oh. Enjoying my company this much. Denki has no idea what he's doing. At all. He should probably stop talking, but that blush on his upperclassman's face is making him think otherwise. Hilarious, Kaminari-kun, Midoriya sighs, straightening out the measuring tape. Now, take that blazer off and stand right here. Oh. Denki lets out a nervous chuckle, desperately trying to keep his expression neutral. At this rate, he wouldn't need his quirk to short-circuit. Midoriya could do it with both eyes closed. You heard me. I need waist measurements because a certain support student didn't give them to me, the older boy grumbles, trailing off. He looks back at Denki, his face immediately softening. Don't worry, it'll only take a second. The electric blonde wants it to be more than a second, but he agrees. Midoriya kneels down, wrapping the tape around the waist of his shirt, and Denki is trying fruitlessly not to hyperventilate right there. Why? Oh, it was nothing really, just that Midoriya is measuring him, and the older boy is so close to him he most definitely can hear Denki's heart beating, and holy Ezi, Denki is so close to passing out because Midoriya's knuckles just brushed his shirt and fuck, Kaminari-kun, I'm not going to be able to get an accurate measurement if you keep squirming. Midoriya chuckles, and Denki stiffens. The support student lets out a soft thanks and finishes measuring, much to Denki's dismay, rolling up the tape as he stands. The electric blonde clenches his jaw. Embarrassing. Well, that's that, the greenette says, turning to look back at Denki. He smiles, giggling as he pulls out a mirror. Oh, by the way, you've got a little something right there. Midoriya points to just under his eye, holding up the mirror for Denki to see. Embarrassing. He was walking around with a heart on his cheek. F it, Denki might as well die on the spot. Or, better yet, Ashido and Sero better be saying their prayers because sorry I didn't mention it earlier. Midoriya laughs sheepishly, offering him a comforting smile, and Denki takes it gratefully. I think it looked cute. Cute. Okay, so maybe it wasn't that embarrassing. Denki might have to thank Sero and Ashido later, too. 4 Musketeers plus Bakugou today at 9:38 AM. Alien Queen. Midoriya and Ashido are better than you. JPG Alien Queen. Mido-senpai and I took a selfie. Alien Queen, you're welcome. Hanta held out his phone, silently screaming. Kirishima's mouth hung open, and Kaminari was trying to pry the device from his hands. Bakugou simply stared, most definitely looking at their upperclassman's muscles, judging by his reddening face. Hanta. Well, he was jealous of Ashido. They definitely shouldn't have teased Bakugou during lunch. The joke was on them. It's been a good week and a half since Midoriya was introduced to Class 1A, and none of the students, Hitoshi included, were faring very well. Could anyone blame them, though? Their upperclassman was perfect in every which way, and Hitoshi wasn't exaggerating that. Not at all. Midoriya had broad shoulders, comment originally uttered by Kirishima sitting atop a lean but well-built body. Hitoshi wasn't a creep, he swore. It was just a very noticeable feature of the greenette, damn it. He had a very attractive face that was splattered by freckles, and green eyes that anyone could get lost in. And now Hitoshi's starting to sound like one of those love-struck idiots in a rom-com cliché. Oh, and by the way, Hitoshi could spend hours simply talking about how jaw-dropping that smile was because goddamn, it gets even better. Not only was Midoriya insanely hot, Kaminari was gushing over a picture Ashido had sent him, his personality was top tier, too. The third-year student was witty and confident, with a quick mouth. Not like that, get your mind out of the gutter, and an even quicker mind. He knew exactly what he was doing at all times, whether he was simply analyzing a quirk or giving out one of his signature winks. And Hitoshi was certain that anyone in 1A would drop to their knees for that, Bakugou being at the front of that line. There was a softer side to Midoriya that called to Hitoshi, however. A sweet, concerned side where the upperclassman would quiet his voice and furrow his brows, eyes glistening with worry. He'd sit and listen to every word, gently nodding his head as he'd smile and offer reassurance. Hitoshi had experienced this firsthand during his costume redesign a week before. "Shinsuke-kun, what's up? You've been pretty tense the whole time I've been speaking," Midoriya had said, stopping in his tracks. Hitoshi had looked up, snapping out of his daze. "Nothing, sorry, Midoriya-senpai," the purple-haired boy had replied, fidgeting with his thumbs. "I must have just spaced out for a second." His upperclassman had squinted his eyes as if he was skeptical. Hitoshi had gulped, refusing to stare back at Midoriya. The greenette had shifted in his seat, scooting just the slightest bit closer to him. "It can't be nothing, Shinsuke, you're playing with your fingers and refusing to look at me directly. What's wrong?" He had stalled, emerald eyes glistening as they pierced through Hitoshi, watching his every move. "Is it about your quirk? I won't pry any deeper if you don't want me to." Hitoshi must have tensed at that comment because he swore he heard a "so it is the quirk" muttered by Midoriya. With a sigh, the purple-haired boy had turned to him, daring to lift his gaze from his hands. I dunno. I feel like I'm out of place here. In my class, I mean. Everyone has these amazing quirks and then there's me, the purple-haired insomniac with a villain's quirk that just so happened to be accepted into A's hero course." Midoriya's expression had twisted even more than it was, a frown contorting his usually bright face. Hitoshi had blinked, gasping when soft, oh so very soft, he mitted fingers brushed his tense knuckles, gentle hands carefully cupping his fists. "Shinsuke-kun, who told you that? About your quirk?" Shinsuke-kun, look at me," his upperclassman had said, voice quiet. "Whoever told you that you had a villainous quirk was dead wrong. No quirk can be considered one thing or another since that is up for the person to decide. Voice quirks like yours are so helpful, especially in hostage situations. What I wouldn't give to have a quirk even remotely close to yours." Midoriya had chuckled, smiling with assurance. "Yeah, but, Shinsuke-kun, I wasn't finished yet." His face became serious again, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Listen, as someone who's quirkless, I've been in the same boat as you. People say the most backward things sometimes, and they end up convincing you that all you'll ever amount to is how good your quirk is. It took me most of my life to figure it out, but I'll tell you now, you're worth way more than just your quirk. If people can't understand the amazing person you are and the amazing person you want to and will be, it's their loss." Midoriya had smiled again, face relaxing. "So don't you dare say you don't belong in 1A. You earned your spot fair and square, okay?" "Oh okay," Hitoshi had mumbled, a red tint coloring his cheeks. This was definitely not the time for catching feelings, but something about the whole conversation was comforting. Maybe Hitoshi was just desperate for the affection. Sue him for it. Anyone else would do the same. Midoriya's face had melted into a warm grin, pearly white teeth showing between his lips. He had let go of Hitoshi's hand sadly, turning back to his notes. "Sorry, didn't mean to bring the mood down. Let's get back to your costume, yeah." Hitoshi couldn't help but mimic that smile, chuckling as his shoulders relaxed. "Why, let's do that. So yeah, it was well beyond the point of denial for Class 1, not that anyone would complain about being attracted to Midoriya. Hell, Hitoshi would be raising his eyebrows if that wasn't the case. I mean, how could anyone not fall for someone like that? As far gone as Hitoshi was, however, he was certainly not expecting to be in a confession circle, something that was starting to look dangerously like a fan club. "It is of utmost importance that we converse, my friends." Tokoyami's usually calm voice rang through their classroom as he slammed the door open with a bang. Hitoshi jumped in his seat, grumbling about being woken up from an unsuccessful attempt of napping. Several others turned in their seats, a wave of confusion enveloping them. It wasn't very much like Tokoyami to enter dramatically, after all. The purple-haired teen looked over to the boy by the door, unamused as he raised an eyebrow. The raven's face beak was flushed, bright red again, that's what Hitoshi assumed. It's pretty hard to tell if a literal bird was blushing or not as he adjusted his uniform. It's about Midoriya-senpai. Dark shadow warbled brightly, earning it a sharp glare from Tokoyami. Everyone immediately straightened in their seats at that, perking up in interest. Hitoshi glanced at Bakugou in front of him, the blonde angrily mumbling in his chair, very obviously irritated for what, Hitoshi had no clue. What the hell do you have to say about Zuken? Oh right. Bakugou had the childhood friend privilege. Fanfitastic for the rest of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe everyone in this class is at least somewhat attracted to our upperclassman. Tokoyami coughed, clearing his throat. If that's the case, I urge us to have a conversation about it. Have a conversation about his feelings. What kind of therapy SHT did Hitoshi sign himself up for? This was definitely not on the hero course syllabus. You want us to talk about Midoriya-senpai? Kaminari piped up, standing from his seat. Oh, he was definitely blushing, judging by the way his voice squeaked. Hitoshi snickered. Man, you don't have to ask me twice, I'd talk about him for free. The rest of them seemed to agree with that sentiment save for Bakugou and Ida, and somehow, Hitoshi found himself sitting in a circle. What the F? Did this really have a purpose? He just wanted to sleep until Aizawa came back, not do whatever the hell they were doing. Everyone, get back to your seats. It is unbecoming of you to be talking behind our upperclassman's back. Ida yelled, chopping the air with his hand. Yeah, what he said. Get back in your seats, fuckwides. Or, come on Blasty. We all know you're at the head of the Midoriya Express, Sero sneered, earning a furious glare from the explosive blonde. It's not the end of the world if you join us. Besides, if you give up that number 1 simp spot, one of us might snatch it from you, Kirishima added, completely serious was he though. Hitoshi swore he saw him wiggle his eyebrows. No, F you, that's my place. Bakugou practically flew out of his seat, joining the circle of huddled students. He looked around, giving each of them a glower. I am and will be the number 1 in this class, Fing got it. That spot is as good as mine, you goddamn extras. I still believe this is a terrible idea. Ida said again, growing louder as he pushed his glasses up his nose. Ida, this would be so much less embarrassing for you if you'd just sit down. It's not every day your class collectively talks about their hot upperclassmen, after all, Eijirou commented lazily, twirling one of her earphone jacks around her finger. Ida simply blushed, reluctantly joining the rest of the group. There was a beat of awkward silence as everyone got situated, squirming around until they were comfortable in their seats. Hitoshi looked around, grimacing as he watched his classmates sitting tensely. With an exasperated sigh, he turns to Tokoyami, and he has absolutely no clue what he's doing. So, Beaks, why don't you go first? This was your idea. The bird stares back at him, spluttering. When I said we should converse, I didn't mean me, he said, voice wobbling. He fixes his uniform again, presumably trying to keep dark shadow in its place. Unluckily for him and to Hitoshi's amusement, his quirk chirruped, erupting from somewhere behind him. Sure, Shinsukuan. We were just walking in the hall today. Well, Fumikage was doing the walking and ended up bumping into Midoriya-senpai. He apologized to us, and you know the thing he does when he's embarrassed. Yeah, he did that. Oh. He also complimented me and told Fumi how cool I am, and Fumi started blushing red. You guys should have seen it. By the way, Midoriya-senpai's hands are so soft, like super. He's so nice. That reminds me, Fumi wrote a poem about him a while ago and it's really sappy, something about roses. He carries it around with him all the time. Anyway, Midoriya-senpai asked us to come to visit him in the department and called us cool. Dark Shadow's ramble was cut off with a squawk, and Tokoyami smothers it with his jacket, uncharacteristically flustered. The rest of the group stared, breaking into a fit of snickers. The bird offered a glare, settling on Eijirou as he pointed a finger. Eijirou, cease your laughter at once. I saw you writing a song about him yesterday. All heads turned to the purple-haired girl, who suddenly flushed in the spotlight. She choked, playing it off as a cough as she hid her face in the crook of her elbow. She side-eyed Tokoyami, the bird shrugging back in defiance. A song. That's certainly a confession, Eijirou offered, hiding a smirk behind his hand. Eijirou, you don't get to talk. You and Shuji fell for him because he said something about how useful extra limbs can be. Pretty pathetic if you ask me, Jirou countered, face still a crimson red. Why was I brought into the argument? Shuji muttered, looking away. Okay, so maybe this wasn't a complete waste of time, after all. If you don't mind, Kuda would like to add that they're in the same boat as Tokoyami, Seitu says during a gap in the ruckus. Kuda nods beside him, shyly playing with their fingers. Midoriya-senpai had called their bunny adorable, and it kinda just happened for Kuda. If that makes sense, he finished, Kuda smiling sheepishly as they hid their face in their hands. I should probably add my own, experience, Seitu continues, rubbing the back of his neck. He offered to help me bake pastries for my quirk, and he trailed off, color filling his cheeks. Seitu, I'm pretty sure Valentine's Day was a while ago, Mineta offers, drool already trickling down the side of his mouth disgusting, if you ask Hitoshi. How did that little SHT of a grape get into the hero course anyway? On the contrary, I don't think Midoriya-senpai misses a single leg day. Have you seen how fat his Mineta is no longer a part of this conversation? Hagakure interrupts him, thank Fing God, pushing him down with a heavy textbook. However, and I think I should contribute my part to this cult. Cult? Midoriya-senpai is super nice, she starts, and Hitoshi can only imagine her twirling a strand of hair he can't know for sure, obviously. He said my quirk was super helpful in undercover missions, and it was just so nice. His smile is nice, everything about him is nice. Why can't every guy be like him? Hagakure finished, sighing theatrically. Dramatic, much. Well, it seems like the majority of Hagakure's vocabulary consists of one word, which is rather bland. Emma huffs, flicking a strand of hair out of their eyes. I, on the other hand, am quite the opposite. You see, I never needed a true reason to be completely infatuated with our upperclassman, Ms. Amy's. I took one look and just knew it was meant to be. They smiled, staring off into space. Hitoshi takes it back. That was dramatic. What the hell were they looking at, anyway? Anyway, I believe Ida-kun should go next. Emma wiggled a finger at the boy, resting their chin in the palm of their other hand. I'm quite interested in what he has to say. Absolutely not. Ida stutters, waving his hands about. Oh, come on, Ida-kun. You just told me the other day that he offered to help you with your combat techniques during your costume redesign. Not to mention you said something about his height, Uraraka teased, to which Ida replied with a vigorous shake of his head. I simply think he is the perfect role model of what every a student should strive to be. Sure, keep telling yourself that, buddy, Hitoshi snickered, reveling in the reaction he got out of the blue-haired boy. Well, since you want to laugh at me, why don't you tell us about your experience? Ida retorted, shoving the glasses back up his nose. Damn it. Nothing special really. Hitoshi looked away, trying to find a way to change the direction of the conversation. No luck. Just that he went on a long lecture about my quirk being something I shouldn't be ashamed of, he mumbled, because it might as well be honest, right? He glanced up, greeted by several pairs of surprised eyes. What? It was comforting, sue me. Todoroki looked at him, blinking slowly. I experienced something similar, he said softly, tilting his head down to gaze at his left hand. He just sat there, simply staring at it. What? Never mind, Hitoshi wasn't sure he wanted to know. I was actually in a situation like that, too. Yorozu put a finger to her face, cheeks flushing a soft pink. He said that I should take better care of myself because of my quirk side effects. He even offered to help me come up with a nutritional plan. Midoriya-senpai truly is very considerate, she murmured, tucking some hair behind her ear. The moment was sweet, considering Hitoshi thought that. Okay, we get that you three are saps, not that I'm surprised by that, Kaminari declares loudly. And that moment's gone. F the living battery, honestly. Denki, you're literally in no position to judge them for liking his personality when you're writing a 5-page essay on how smart he is. Kirishima interrupts him, voice loud in exasperation. Why? Well, at least I'm not the one trying to print a hard copy of the photo Mina sent us. You mean the one she sent me? Sero butted in, whipping out his phone to showcase the image in context. Oh, wow. Hitoshi needed that picture. You guys were just trying to take the phone from me. What picture? Someone shouts, though Hitoshi's not sure who. It's starting to get noisy. Speaking of Ashido, why hasn't she or Zu said anything? Ejirou pointed out, turning the attention to the girls. Probably because I'm in a steady relationship with my girlfriend. Ashido yawns, stretching her arms. I'm morose, Tsuyu says indifferently, going back to reading the book in her hands. But all of you can continue, this is very entertaining. Here. That made a lot of sense, actually. You two already have that stuff figured out. Uraraka whines, picking at her nails. Lucky. I thought I knew what I was, but then Midoriya-senpai just had to come along and set me into a crisis. Like, is it just admiration for him or something else? She sighed, light pink tinting her cheeks. I can agree with that sentiment, Yorozu murmurs. You think sexuality crisis is bad. Just wait until you think you have your gender figured out, Sero mutters under his breath. As much as we should be having this conversation, don't you think we've been straying from the main topic? Ida seems to have finally given in, now fully engaged in the circle. I opt for a Midoriya Fan Club. Kaminari shouts. What? That's the most ridiculous thing Hitoshi's ever heard. Unfortunately, most of the others think otherwise. Fortunately, Bakugou seems to be on the same page as him. No Fing Wei, the explosive blonde stands up, presumably going back to his desk. I'm not taking part in that shit show. Hey, I guess Bakugou doesn't want to keep that #1 spot, after all. Oh, guess Hitoshi and Bakugou weren't on the same page after all because that effer stops in his tracks and turns around, wordlessly sitting back down next to Kaminari. No one gets to be #1 other than me, understand? You might as well make me the Fing president of this. Goddammit. Oh. They definitely weren't on the same page now. It's okay, Baku, I have the hots for Midoriya-senpai, as well, Todoroki deadpans, looking the blonde right in the eye. Hots? What the F? There's a moment of silence in the circle, and Hitoshi thinks that maybe now is a good time to run. I don't have the hots for him, you half and half bast. So, is the Midoriya Fan Club officially founded, then? Kaminari asks, clapping his hands. And his timing couldn't have been any better, because holy Fing 𝙎𝙧𝙮, Aizawa decides to walk into the room. Shouto really hates his job sometimes. Like right now, when his students are sitting in a circle on the ground, with Bakugou looking like he's about to commit homicide, Mineta squashed under a textbook, and Kaminari shouting. About a Midoriya Fan Club. Hey, Aizawa-sensei, Kaminari says with a weak chuckle. I don't even want to know. If everyone isn't back in their seats in the next 15 seconds, I am going to have a pile of expulsion papers sitting on my desk. F being a teacher. Shouto sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose. Looks like that bet with the rest of the staff will continue. What a pain in the butt. A mere 48 hours have passed since the founding of the Midoriya Fan Club and life couldn't get any better at UA. And to be completely honest, things were going fairly smoothly, keyword, fairly. After the entirety of 1A yes, including a certain explosive blonde confessed their admiration and more for Midoriya, they immediately set up a group chat specifically to assign positions in their little club effort, might as well call it a cult. Of course, there was plenty of argument about which students would fill those posts, but 1A eventually figured it out. Aizawa was not amused when he had to send a distressed, black-eyed AMR and a bruised Ejirou down to Recovery Girl yesterday. Just this morning Ida had brought in hard copies of the official list of the council, as they called it. Bakugou Katsuki was chosen to be the president of their setup upon his assistance. It was something about being the #1, as he had said it. Not that anyone disagreed, it was a commonly known fact by now that the blonde was head over heels for Midoriya, judging by the way his face turned a crimson red anytime the older boy so much as placed a soft hand on his shoulder. Still, that didn't take away from the fact that it was a letdown for each student when they weren't the ones in that #1 spot. Kaminari Denki was a surprise to no one at all, being voted the vice president. If Bakugou weren't in their class, the electric blonde surely would have taken that first place. It wasn't completely out of the ordinary for the students to find him working on that intelligence essay during class. Kirishima was wrong. It was ongoing, currently at 15 pages, nor was it strange to find his notebooks covered in neat doodles of the support student. All in all, he was a fair choice for VP. Ida Tenure was definitely not on board with the fan club idea at first, as he was a very diligent person. According to him, diligent people did not have time for such trivial matters as taking part in a club not provided by the academy. So it was quite a shocker when Ida proposed to be the head secretary of the club, it being on his own will no less. He had insisted, actually it was borderline begging, as 𝙎𝙪 put it. No one was upset by this in the slightest. The blue-haired boy's development was coming along nicely. Todoroki Shouto was stubborn. So stubborn in fact that he paid the others to vote him as treasurer. It definitely was not rigged. Not at all. The dual-haired boy claimed that he had the money to keep them afloat, whatever the hell that meant. His other cause to be placed on the council was for the sole reason to bother Bakugou, who was already always one comment away from blowing up the classroom. Todoroki would never admit that he found this amusing. That was a lie. Shuji saw him smirking just yesterday. Ashido Mina and Asui Tsuyu had joined, as well just for SHTS and giggles. They were responsible for taking pictures with Midoriya, simply because they were the only ones that weren't flustered beyond belief anytime they came across the greenet. It didn't hurt that they were very well versed in photography, either. Triple plus, they got paid for it, and DMN did they need it. They were broke high school students, after all. Lastly, Yorozu Momo was responsible for making merchandise. Yes, merchandise. Any banners, clips, or pins were produced by her, all bearing the same letters printed in an emerald green, the MFC. They looked good if she did say so herself. And perhaps it was over-planning, but where's the hurt in that? Anything for their upperclassmen, anything at all. With all said and done, the final wrinkles in the plans for the fan club were sorted out and smoothed over, and 1A collectively sighed in relief that they were prepared. They had an output for their feelings and realizations now, ones that they had chosen to hold in during the week before. It was calming really, knowing that they had a private group specializing in fawning for Midoriya. It was a genius idea, after all. So unique. So brilliant. So original. No one had ever thought of that before, they said to themselves. Life loves to F with unsuspecting high school students because they couldn't have been further from the truth. Alright, 1A, I hope you all stretched out. Midoriya exclaims, stretching his arms over his head as he calls out to the class. Hanta squeezes his way through the crowd of his classmates, peeking his face between the heads of Ashido and Kaminari to catch a glimpse of the support student addressing them. Their upperclassman was suited up in a gym uniform similar to theirs, the only difference being the bright red utility belt wrapped snugly around his waist. And maybe it isn't entirely appropriate of him, but Hanta swears that he was looking respectfully. He was, okay. He definitely was. Midoriya was snatched. Hanta would have to find the genius mothif who made that uniform and personally thank them later. From what I know, Aizawa-sensei's been running a few classes on open hand-hand sparring. Midoriya's voice is loud and clear, cheerful as he explains today's lesson. He also mentioned that no quirks were permitted during your combat sessions. Well, that gave me an idea. Of course, I had to get Aizawa-sensei's permission for this, because all of you will be using your quirks today. A murmur of excitement ripples through the hero students, hushed whispers quieting as soon as Midoriya speaks again. He'll be joining us today instead of All Might, especially since we're working on distance-related combat as our main lesson. A couple of kids groan at the sight of their teacher, who for some reason is still sleeping in that godforsaken bag. It was quite warm today, so Hanta didn't understand how that man wasn't drenched in his sweat. As you're all aware, fighting styles are a major part of how you utilize your quirks as heroes. There's no one right way to fight because depending on your and your opponent's capabilities, circumstances can change almost instantly. Midoriya snaps his fingers, emphasizing his statement. That's why it's so important to know how to fight at all distances, even if you prefer a certain range over another. Makes sense. Their faces must have looked utterly bewildered because the greenet smiles, bending over as he breaks out into a soft laugh. It's a pretty sound, Hanta thinks. The third year looks up at the class, clearing his throat. Guess not. How about this, all of you get to see a demonstration. Sero-kun, get up here. Hanta feels his heart stop and he blinks, standing there like a fing idiot. Me? Yes, you. I don't think there's another Sero in this class, is there? Midoriya retorts, eyes twinkling at his joke. Oh. Right, haha. Hanta lets out a nervous chuckle, making his way out of the crowd and into the clearing. There's a heat burning at the tip of his ears, and as much as he desperately wishes that no one would notice his trembling legs, he can't help but smirk at the lucky BS that Bakugou most definitely did not say. Hanta turns to face Midoriya, gulping as the boy grins at him. Okay, Sero-kun, I want you to spar with me. Fight the way you know how to, and don't be afraid to use your quirk. I'll let you make the first move. Ready? Hanta nods, fixing his stance as he places his arms in front of him. The third year is relaxed, patiently waiting for him with his hands at either side of his body, leaving himself completely open and vulnerable to an attack. Hanta surges forward, releasing 2 long ribbons of tape out of his elbows. It was a long-range strike, something the Ravenet figured wouldn't go wrong with his type of quirk. It was better to apprehend the offender from a distance, after all. Something whizzed past his right ear, and Hanta stumbles forward into the space that was previously occupied by Midoriya. The greenette has a lopsided smile plastered on his face, his head tilted slightly to the side. Gotta be faster than that, Sero-kun. Hanta huffs, determined to give it his all. He shoots another STRP of tape, this time aiming for the other's legs. If he can just hook him by the ankle, he'd have a chance at winning the spar. The only problem was that Midoriya was fast. He was really fast. The supported student was agile and light on his feet, never planted in one spot for more than a second. And while he wasn't static, he never moved more than he needed to. Hanta would have to change up his style if he was going to catch him. And with a new mindset, the Ravenet decides to SWCH from long range to middle range. He was still far enough away from the other, but just close enough to capture a limb. The two danced around each other, dodging attacks and lunging in for their own strikes. Midoriya would throw a kick and Hanta would duck under, retaliating with his tape as he leaped back when he got too close. Just when he thought that there would be no end to this match, Midoriya opened up, and Hanta grinned in victory. The hero student seized his upperclassman's arm, cheering internally as he reeled him in to deal a final blow. Except, maybe he shouldn't have celebrated that early. Because Midoriya was calm, offering him a sweet, innocent smile that shouldn't have made him stare the way he did. It was only about when Hanta was a little more than halfway through pulling him that the older boy moved. The greenette spun sharply, whipping his leg around so it barely missed Hanta's head. The black-haired boy yelled in surprise as he ducked, knocked out of his daze. Before he could counter, the third year took a hold of his tape, tugging him aggressively as he used the same tactic. Hanta almost misses the strong arms that wrap around the front of his shoulders, pushing him down as he's swept off his feet literally. Disoriented, he looks around and oh my! Midoriya's staring down at him. On top of him. His chest heaves as he catches his breath, freckled face smiling in triumph. Hanta's seen him up close plenty of times, but honestly, nothing would ever beat this. And that picture Ashido had sent in the chat a few days ago. That did no thing service to Midoriya's muscles because holy s, Hanta would do anything to respectfully nice job, Sero-kun. Midoriya says, standing up. He offers a hand to the Ravenet, and as much as Hanta wishes that they could have stayed like that for just a bit longer, he takes the other's hand willingly, reveling at its touch and no, for the record, Hanta most certainly does not have a hand K&K. This is Midoriya we're talking about, of course he'd hold his hand without hesitation. Now, hopefully you all understand what I was talking about earlier. Sero-kun here originally stuck to long-range combat because that's the most common way to equip a quirk like his. Midoriya pauses, taking a quick look at him that really shouldn't have made Hanta stiffen in his spot. Not that Sero-kun shouldn't fight with distance, that's actually a clever way to handle a villain. It's just that because long-range combat is so compatible with his quirk, people who want to do harm will pick up on it and figure out a way to maneuver out of his attacks. That's why when he swayed over to a more mid-range style, I had to work harder to avoid his tape. The greenette smiles, sending him a thumbs up. Hanta most definitely blushes and yes, He was certain that everyone saw what Midoriya said. It's important to familiarize yourself with different styles of fighting so that you won't find yourself backed up into a corner if someone knows how to counter your moves. Partner up, and try fighting at different distances. Midoriya and I will be watching, so no horsing around with your quirks, understand? Aizawa mutters, finally stepping out of that atrocious sleeping bag. Hanta watches his classmates nod fervently, pairing up as soon as their teacher stops talking. He heads to join them, only to be held back by a gentle hand. Sero-kun, why don't you take a quick break? You hit your head pretty hard when I took you down, sorry about that. Midoriya's voice was soft, laced with the slightest bit of concern. Oh, had Hanta hit his head? He couldn't remember, he was too busy staring at the greenette. I'll work with Kaken for now, and then you can take my place later. Sound good? Being paired up with Bakugou would be worrying at any other time, but Hanta figures this is a problem for future him. He nods, thanking the older boy as he excuses himself and walks to the sides of the training grounds, groaning as a soft drumming pulsed at the back of his head. Oh. So he did hit his head after all. Here. Hanta's surprised when he hears loud voices coming off from just outside the grounds, so much so that he can hear their conversation. 3 students stand in the distance, each appearing to be a little older than himself. Maybe they're second years. Man, did you see the way they were looking at him while he was sparring that other kid? They were practically foaming at the mouth. Shut up, Saito, you were literally just doing that. It's not my fault Midoriya's so hot. Speaking of hot, I'm kinda jealous of the one that got pinned. You and almost every other person at this school. I don't think anyone's immune to the Mido Effect. I'm telling you, if they actually approved of that club idea last year, all the other extracurriculars would be vacant. The 3 giggle at that and walk away, and Hanta can't help but hang on to their words. Mido Effect. Club. Not that he was opposed to that, but were there really that many people that found the 3rd year attractive? Actually, this was Midoriya he was talking about, so really, it shouldn't have been much of a surprise. Hanta didn't get too lost in his thoughts thanks to a harsh voice yell. Sero! Break time's up. And make sure you run. Hanta sighed, making his way back to the field of students. And the thing he said about Bakugou earlier. Yeah, that was going to be a real thing problem now. The Mido Effect. Respectfully, what the hell are you talking about, Sero-kun? Tsuyu ribbits, taking in a mouthful of fruit jelly. The boy's been talking non-stop about something he heard out on the training grounds during their lesson with Midoriya, something about a club. And the Mido Effect. I don't know, Zu, but a few second years were talking about it, he replied, looking down to take a sip of his soup. Actually, I heard something earlier, too. Eijirou joined in, sitting down at the table with a tray of food. I was running an errand to Yamada-sensei and 2 girls were talking about falling under the Mido Effect, whatever that means, she said, twirling one of her earjacks. And you didn't bother telling us this. How long ago did this happen? Sero scoffed, looking more offended than necessary. If Tsuyu didn't know any better, she'd say that all her classmates were just gay theater kids. Yesterday, Eijirou replied, shrugging her shoulders. She looked up at him, narrowing her eyes. Now shush, I wasn't finished talking. Apparently, the Mido Effect is something people started as a saying. If you are at all, in any way, shape, or form, attracted to Midoriya-senpai, you fall under that phrase. I know most of 1A does. Eijirou, how where the F do you get this kind of information? The Ravenet sighs, waving his arms in exasperation. The purple-haired girl merely shrugs again, picking up her chopsticks. Information is accessible anywhere, I guess. The 3 of them sit in a comfortable quiet, enjoying their meals as they assume the end of the conversation. But then something clatters in front of them, a tray hitting the floor of the cafeteria. A girl, most likely a 3rd year, looks absolutely humiliated, standing with her knees knocking against each other. Midoriya, who just so happened to be passing by, calls out to her. Tsuyu watches as the girl turns into a blushing mess, bowing repeatedly to a flustered Midoriya. She leans down at the same time he does, the both of them piling food on top of the tray. The girl apologizes again, hurriedly running away as she leaves a confused Midoriya scratching his head. You 2 saw that, right? Sero whispers, a hand over his mouth. That had to be the Mido Effect, Eijirou mutters. DMN. As it turned out, the Mido Effect became increasingly more visible since Sero first heard about it and Eijirou too. Don't discredit her. It was everywhere now, and really, 1A feels dumb for not noticing it beforehand except Bakugou, of course. They were everywhere, people like them, ones who convinced themselves that they weren't completely head over heels for Midoriya. There were also students that didn't bother hiding their adoration for the third year, the people who would willingly serenade to him if given the chance. And then there was the small population that wasn't interested in him in the slightest, watching from afar as they snickered at the pining idiots. In particular, there were a few students who very well represented each of these categories. Minoma Nito was already a menace to Class 1A, being an obnoxious brat and all. It's a wonder Bakugou hadn't blown him into pieces yet. No, it wasn't a wonder. That was a lie. Midoriya was the only reason that boy didn't go feral. Minoma was someone who fit into the first category, someone who would bash 1A for looking up to the greenette. At the same time, however, he would be constantly up in their faces, grumbling about, "Oh, Midoriya-senpai would have worked so much better with us instead of you some." It was becoming a daily occurrence for them. Hatsumi was another person 1A was quickly becoming wary of. The girl was in the support course, someone with so much energy that she could fill at least 5 electric cars on her willpower alone. Hatsumi followed Midoriya around with stars in her eyes, always hammering something down in the third year's latest inventions. They didn't know her personally, in fact they barely knew her name, but it was quite clear what she thought of their support student. Lastly, there were Midoriya's friends in his grade. When the idea of them being the greenette's best friends was suggested, Bakugou shut it down quickly. Class 1A was only familiar with one of the three, that only because Midoriya addressed him as Mirio-kun. There were no strong opinions on them yet, but because 1A was, well, 1A, there was no doubt that there would be a stance on them quite soon. So yeah, 1A had quite the competition, if anyone could call it that. As students in the class came to that realization, they came to one conclusion they agreed on, mainly decided by Bakugou once again. He insisted they'd work harder than anyone else to stay as Midoriya's favorites. Because there was one thing quite clear about this situation, one thing that the others in the school will quickly come to understand. The students of Class 1A were the most influenced by the Mido Effect. And fing hell were they proud of it. Izuku yawned, ruffling his hair as he stopped by the coffee machine in the teacher's lounge. Don't ask him why or how, but he got access to the key in his first year, and has been stopping by ever since. Mornings are tiring. You alright, kid? Aizawa speaks, making Izuku jump in his spot. You look like you crawled out of a grave. Ha, I'm laughing, that was so funny. Izuku deadpans, lifting the mug to his lips. The black-haired man smirks, squirming back into that god-awful thing he called a sleeping bag. Shouter, don't tease him, Yamada speaks up, hiding a smile. The poor kid gets less sleep than you do. Not to mention, he keeps getting those letters. Please don't remind me. That's the first thing I saw in my locker this morning. I had to spend 5 minutes just cleaning pink envelopes off the ground. He sighs, reaching in his pocket to pull out a candy. At least the chocolate was good. Chocolate? Khan raises an eyebrow. He looks worried. Ha! I knew it. Pay up, Vlad. Kiyoma jumps out of her seat, shoving a hand in Khan's face. Pay you know what? Never mind, I don't even wanna know, Izuku says, sipping his coffee. I'll catch you guys for your classes later. Don't get too crowded by your fans. Yamada laughs as the greenette shuts the door behind him. Fans. He doesn't bother thinking too hard about it. It's better not to question some people at the school, anyway. Mornings are fing tiring. Zukan always said that they didn't feel like a boy. For as long as Katsuki could remember, Izuku would stare longingly at girls not in that fing way. Zukan would never, wishfully hoping for something that the blonde wasn't aware of. The greenette would then turn to him and stare him down, lost in thought as he'd say, what would it feel like to look like them? You know, girly. And of course, Katsuki would never know how to answer, considering he never felt like being girly. That wasn't to say he wasn't completely opposed to wearing dresses or skirts. He and 𝙎𝙬 snuck into his old man's discarded designs all the time when they were younger. What? They made him look good, goddammit. It was just that he never felt like a girl, to put it simply. And that was that. However, 𝙎𝙬 said they didn't feel like a girl either. And though Katsuki had no idea what that made him, he didn't really pay any mind to it. He'd still adore Izuku either way. But not like in a crush way or anything. F off. The blonde would just nod, simply accepting the brunette for who they most felt comfortable as. It was only until 𝙎𝙬's first year at U. Did they come out as non-binary. It was a short talk, but something that ended in tears and crying nonetheless, because leave it to 𝙎𝙬 for the waterworks. Not that Katsuki minds. His shoulder was free 24 hours a day when it came to Izuku. Kaken. 𝙎𝙬 had said softly, looking up from his notes as he closed the book in his hands. Katsuki had grunted, cheeks tinted a soft red as viridian eyes gazed at him. The other's hair bounced against his forehead, a light breeze ruffling his curls oh so gently. It was near sunset, and Izuku had dragged Katsuki off to an abandoned beach for studying and running tests. It wasn't a date. No fing way. Anything wrong? Katsuki had muttered, scribbling down a problem for math. It was some dumb quadratics problem that he had to graph, no calculators allowed. Izuku's stare bore into him, and so, with a dramatic flick of his wrist, the blonde dared to look back. No, nothing in particular. I just wanted to talk to you about something, he had said with a sheepish smile. Katsuki had quirked his brow at that, prompting him to continue. The brunette had blushed a soft pink, freckles more prominent than ever. He took a quick breath, as he was about to say something truly extraordinary. So, you know how I don't feel like a boy. Or a girl, for that matter. Katsuki had snorted, rolling his eyes without any real annoyance. Yeah. You mentioned that like every 5 minutes. Yeah, well, I figured out why. Izuku had giggled with him, his laugh making the blonde's heart beat just a tad faster. What? No it didn't, mind your own goddamn business. The older boy's smile disappeared quickly, though, as a tight frown replaced the quirk of his lips. Kaken, I don't feel like I fit into a gender. I think I'm non-binary. Oh. Katsuki was not expecting that at all. He must have taken too long to respond because now 𝙎𝙬 was going on a ramble. SHT. That was kind of sudden. Maybe I shouldn't have confessed so quickly. How do you feel? Please don't be angry with me, okay? Wait. Not that I think you won't be angry, I just wanted to tell you, that's all. I guess I just wanted to get it off my chest, and I figured it would be easiest to talk to you first, you know. Kaken, you aren't saying anything and it's scaring me. Was I too forward? I really shouldn't have. Why would I be angry with you? Katsuki had interrupted, placing a hand on the other's shoulders. Hey. Why would I be angry with you? It's not like I give a F about what you identify as. SHT. That came out wrong in so many different ways. Katsuki had cleared his throat, mumbling. What I mean is, you figuring something out about yourself isn't gonna make my opinion on you change. You're still Izuku or, unless you want me to call you something else. Well, I'd prefer it if you'd call me 𝙎𝙬, but yeah, I'm still Izuku, the brunette grinned, teasing the blonde. But could you start using neutral pronouns for me? Don't get me wrong, I still feel comfortable with he and him, but I think I'd really like it if you'd use the too. And with that soft look in their eyes, trusting and hopeful, how could Katsuki have said no? He shrugged his shoulders, nodding in agreement. Izuku lit up at that, a smile that could outshine the sun spreading across his face. It was such a stupid smile, really. Katsuki hated it with his entire heart. No, he didn't. Thanks, Kaken, the older had said, leaning to the side to rest on Katsuki's shoulder. Nope, he definitely didn't panic at that. For what? Accepting you. Any half-decent person would do the same. People who think otherwise can go F themselves, the blonde murmured. It was true. Anyone who dared to have the audacity was a piece of SHT who was waiting for their but to be handed to them by Katsuki. You're more than half-decent, 𝙎𝙬 had whispered, their forest curls tickling the blonde's cheek, or was it his blush? He couldn't really tell. Before Katsuki could figure out whatever the F that meant, however, Izuku had stood up, reaching a hand out to him to grab. And of course, he had taken it without hesitation as he slung his bag over his shoulder. After all, Katsuki couldn't have just ignored the opportunity of holding his friend's hand. So with that, the two of them bid farewell to the beach, the sun setting behind them. And if Katsuki thought that was romantic, no Hefing didn't. Katsuki never thought any less of Izuku, and why the F would he? The greenette was happy, so he was, to note, grumpy and unhappy are two different things, as Zucken had put it. The nerd had told his mom second, and auntie being auntie, she threw them a little celebration with more spicy katsudon than Katsuki could stuff his mouth with. It was only a matter of time before his hag and old man found out, and of course, they offered Zucken the most androgynous articles of clothing they could find, and Izuku looked good in every single one of them. The greenette even got around to telling some of their closest friends at UA, and Katsuki was glad that they were opening up, although he can't say much about what he thought about the loud blonde one. So naturally, it wasn't unexpected for Zucken to bring up the conversation of coming out one day. Or night, in this case. The nerd had absolute SHT timing, with no concept of time whatsoever. It was past Katsuki's curfew, and being completely honest, the blonde was 6 feet in his sleep. That was until his phone buzzed loudly when suddenly, he wasn't. Katsuki jolts awake, groaning in annoyance as he scrambles to get the device. He swears, if it's one of those goddamn extras that follow him around all day blowing up the chat, he'll fingo. It was from Zucken. Katsuki tapped the notification, opening up their messages. Zucken. Today at 22:17 Zucken. Hey Kaken. Can I call you? Go the F to sleep. Despite the text, Katsuki selected his contact, pressing the video call button. Not even a ring passes and Izuku answers, freckled face illuminated by the blue light. Hi, Kaken. What the hell are you doing up so late? Katsuki grunts, voice raspy from drowsiness. What, oh, I guess it's super late for you, my bad. Zucken giggles, poking fun at Katsuki's sleeping habits. Yeah, it thing is, so if you could be so kind and spit out whatever it is you're trying to say, I'd appreciate it. I've got school tomorrow, the blonde retorted, feeling his ears heat up at the taunts. M'kay, Grandpa, Zucken rolled their eyes, snorting as they held in another laugh. Before Katsuki could yell at that, he obliged, shifting the conversation to the main point. So, you know how there are a few people who know about my identity? Well, I figured it's time to let a few more know. Katsuki scrunched his nose, rubbing his eyes before stifling a yawn. So you're coming out? Well, sort of. I really don't think it'd be a good idea to run around and announce that I'm non-binary, after all. I'm thinking more of telling the staff and maybe Class 1A. I think they deserve to know. So why are you asking me about this? And don't say some bullshit about them not accepting you or whatever. I know for a fact that the teachers practically adopted you. I'm pretty sure they'd welcome you with open arms. As for 1A, Aizawa would probably expel anyone who showed any discrimination. But look, it's your choice, Zucken. You don't owe people a single thing explanation. But if you do want to tell them, I'll butt whoop anyone less than accepting of you, Katsuki finalized with a confirming nod. Even that grape kid. Especially that shitty grape. Good, because the words that come out of his mouth are really concerning. Zucken huffs, breathing into the mic. I'm not sure how he got into the hero course in the first place. Neither do we. I'm pretty sure Aizawa's on the last straw with him. After a moment of thought, he adds, I've never tried grape juice. Does it taste good? Kaken. A loud shriek comes from the other end of the call. Izuku is in shock as he scolds. The blonde. Don't make jokes like that. Come on, it was funny. Katsuki smirks, watching the other's eyes widen. No, it wasn't. You're so mean, Kaken. Zucken, Whisper yelled, doing a shitty job of acting angry. The nerd was laughing, dimples denting either side of his face. They talked for a while after that, speaking in quiet voices as they told each other about future lessons at UA. The entire time Katsuki was struggling to keep his eyes open, and Izuku laughed at him for it. The blonde didn't mind though. Zucken could step on him for all he cared. Eventually, though, the greenette gave in, softly chuckling about letting Katsuki get his beauty rest. The call ends and he sighs, setting the phone on his nightstand. Before he drifts off to sleep, however, Katsuki opens his messages one last time, sending a single text before burying his head under the covers. Zucken. Thanks for that kaken 3 me whatever. Now go the F to sleep. Night. Okako was a lesbian. That meant she was attracted to anyone who didn't identify as a man. Don't get her wrong, she's had plenty of crushes on masculine-presenting people. Mako was her favorite hero for a reason, just that said people were non-men. And she's definitely had her fair share of comfort, mind you, something she hopes she never has to experience again. So it's safe to say that she was a lesbian. In fact, Okako was sure of it. That was until a certain green-haired support student stepped into Class 1A. At first, it wasn't that big of a deal. Sure, he was conventionally attractive, but Okako didn't pay much mind to him. She was too busy getting herself situated in the hero course, and quite frankly, she found the strange pink-haired girl that followed him around much more interesting. But then, Midoriya began to spend more time with 1A, whether it was a combat lesson or just analysis on their quirks, and Okako constantly felt herself gravitating towards him. Maybe it was just admiration for the older boy, but she didn't think that the giddiness and flushed cheeks would be a part of that, right? No, it had to be something else. Naturally, Okako came to the conclusion that maybe she really was attracted to him. Subsequently, she had a sexuality crisis. The brunette hated to assume it, but Midoriya presented as a male. Sure, he wore eyeliner and nail polish and gods have mercy because he looked hot, but makeup doesn't necessarily equate to gender. And yes, perhaps Midoriya was more on the androgynous side, cue the gender envy, as Irma had put it, but judging by the way other people addressed him, it was quite clear not really that he was a man. Right. As soon as Okako had realized how far she was in the situation, she started surfing the internet for answers. She figured she was somewhere on the bi spectrum, something that included more than one then gender. That was almost immediately shut down after the thought of comfort came up again. Okako had promptly thrown her phone to the ground after that, earning it another crack. Sexuality crisis thing scared. And so, she was completely caught off guard when Midoriya walks in on Friday morning, smiling brightly as he stands at the front of the room. As Okako looks around, she locks eyes with Shinsu, offering him a shrug of her shoulders when he squints in confusion. The rest of their classmates seem to do the same, utterly bewildered by this sudden appearance. Midoriya never showed up for their morning classes, after all, unless it was for an unexpected hero lesson. The only person who wasn't fazed by this development was Bakugou, the angry blonde fidgeting with his pencil with an air of boredom. Morning, 1A. Hopefully, you're all doing good, Midoriya chirped with enthusiasm. However, something was lacking. Was Okako just sleep-deprived or was he nervous? No, she definitely isn't lacking sleep, at least she thinks she isn't, so it must be the latter. He was tense, brows slightly knit together as he reached the nape of his neck and scratched it. Good morning, Mido-senpai. What's with the surprise show-up? Ashido practically yelled, waving her arm in the air. All eyes turned back to the greenette at the front, the one who was now chuckling nervously. About that, I actually wanted to talk about something really quickly. Midoriya glanced quickly to the side at Aizawa, as if he was seeking approval for something. His eyes then flicked to Bakugou, who gave him a confirming nod. What the hell was going on? As you know, A is a place where discrimination against anything is strictly forbidden. That includes, but is not restricted to, quirks, race, sexuality, and gender identity, the third year says, stumbling over his words in the most subtle way possible. Okako's pretty sure that everyone in 1A has read over A's policies already, so she's not exactly sure where Midoriya's going with this. I should have said something about this when I first met all of you, but I didn't. I'm sorry about that. He let out a weak chuckle, and Bakugou frowned. That can't be good. Anyways, I digress. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is that I feel like it's time I tell you something that I wasn't previously comfortable sharing. Midoriya takes a deep breath, closing his eyes. There's a dramatic silence that blankets the room, and the only audible sound is the soft clicking of pink clips in the upperclassman's hair. Finally, after an eternity of quiet, he says, I'm non-binary. Oh. Maybe it was selfish of her to think this, but Okako can't help but celebrate in her head. She quickly glanced over to Yorozu, who seemed to have the same idea. Giddy with delight, the brunette smiled to herself, despite the otherwise tense atmosphere. Guess it wasn't comfort, after all. As if mimicking her thoughts, the room burst into a fit of noise, people murmuring loudly in excitement. Midoriya blinked in surprise, confused but relieved of the sudden racket. Bakugou simply smirked, quirking his lips as he twirled his pencil. Aizawa only squirmed further into that crusty sleeping bag of his. "Thank you for telling us, senpai." Kaminari chirped, his voice ringing out the loudest. "I'm quite relieved that you felt comfortable enough to speak to us," Ida promptly exclaimed, chopping the air. "I too do not fit into a gender binary, Midoriya-senpai." AMR smiled, flipping hair out of their face as they stared off into space. Midoriya laughed at that, tense shoulders relaxing at the class's words. The greenette turns over to Bakugou, who now wears an uncharacteristically soft smile, scary, if Okako did say so herself. Although, it would make perfect blackmail material. "What did I tell you about these extras?" the blonde says, earning him a pearly white grin from the upperclassman. "Wait, what?" Kirishima practically screams, face replicating that of a kicked puppy. "How long have you known?" "Obviously since they told me, dumbass." But how come you never used, the right pronouns?" Bakugou looks down, the smile disappearing off his face. He stands from his seat, a scowl wrinkling his face. "'Cause that without him, hair for brains. I'm not gonna use pronouns that he doesn't want me to use in front of random people. Besides, the nerd's fine with he and him." Yorozu must not have heard that last sentence because she was cupping her face, bowing repeatedly as she too rose from her seat. "Were we misgendering you? Oh, how awful. That was so irresponsible of us, please excuse our behavior." The thought of misgendering Midoriya hit everyone like a truck, and suddenly, there were 19 students hysterically nodding their heads in regret, make that 18 Todoroki had no idea what was happening. "Oh, gosh, Midoriya chuckles nervously, face flushing a bright red in the attention. He's obviously pleased, though flustered was what he was most likely feeling right now. "Relax, everyone, it's okay. Really? None of you knew, so it's all good." "That doesn't make it any better," Zu croaked, poking her cheek with a finger. "We should have asked you. And I should have done the same, so the apology goes both ways." They smile, the initial overload finally calming down. They straightened out their uniform, flashing another bright smile. "Okako will never truly get over how heart-throbbing it is. But seriously, Midoriya-senpai, if anyone ever gives you any trouble, just tell us. We'll give them 10 times more hell back," Sero shouts, causing a loud ruckus to fill the room once again. It got fairly loud quickly, as Okako's classmates yelled in agreement and goddamn Kaminari hollers. Even Bakugou joins in, which again, is scarily out of character. "All right, you brats, get back in your seats. We've got a class to start and I'm sure Midoriya still has tinkering to do. You can all ogle at them later." "Do they have to go?" "I mean, they can sit with us and analyze our quirks," the electric blonde whines, looking at their upperclassmen. "As much as I'd like to stay, I have a super important support item I need to finish making," he says, much to everyone's dismay. "But, you can definitely stop by if you have a free PRD later." And with that, Midoriya winks, leaving longing eyes staring after them. Okako sighs, cheeks flushed slightly as she types in the chat. "MDF today at 8:09 MFVCK Gravity, who's up for lunch in the support department today?" Shouto, Insomnia Esikis, Murder God and 16 others are typing. Okako grinned. Lunch in the support department it was, then. Splendid. It turned out that Denki wasn't very good at writing essays. Wait, let him rephrase that. Essays are really hard to write. Especially when they're about certain green-haired support students that are specifically third years, covered in a generous amount of freckles, and have the most blinding smile humanly possible. There was way too much to write. Yet, Denki couldn't bring himself to ditch his writing. He was a committed man for FS sake. And so, currently at 20 pages, several grammatical errors, and circa 9,000 words, Denki's vent essay on Midoriya is coming along lovely. And those numbers were continuously rising. Fabulous. That brought him to lunch. The electric blonde isn't dumb, he knows that it's not polite to have anything other than food on a table while eating, but is a little bit of typing really hurting anyone? Denki decides no on that and stuffs a bit of rice in his mouth, cheeks puffing out on either side of his face. Clearly, there are others who aren't as thrilled to have a laptop on their lunch table. Bakugou, for one, looks utterly cessed. Then again, when was he not? Denki snickered to himself, daring to look in the angry blonde's direction. Said blonde subsequently gave him a death glare, and Denki concluded that if he wanted to keep his head and his hair today, it was best to go right back to his essay. For now. About a good 5 minutes back into his typing, the boy felt a light tapping on his shoulder. Denki snapped his head up from the screen, meeting a click of Mina's fingers. Right after, a flash of a camera and a snort that most definitely came from Sero. Damn it. Earth to Denki. Kirishima waved a hand in front of him, earning another fit of giggles from the other two. You there? The electric blonde nodded slowly, squinting as his eyes darted from red to pink to black. They were oddly quiet in terms of teasing him today, so what the hell was going on? You've been awfully invested in that laptop of yours, Sero pointed out, poking at his coffee jelly. What you writing about anyway? Mina tilted her head, placing her hands on the table to lean in across the table. And perhaps this was a sign for Denki to learn how to think before he spoke, because immediately after she said that, his dumbass self just had to shout for the entire cafeteria to hear, no one. Denki internally slapped himself for that. Respectfully, what the F nothing. I meant, nothing, he said, completely serious. Hopefully, he would be able to cover that F up. Get it together, Denks. What the hell are you doing, man? He was, in fact, not able to cover it up. His friends went quiet for a moment, and in the far back of his brain, the electric blonde thought that that would be the end of it. But no, Denki just had to be teased. About it, didn't he? To be fair, he did the same thing to them, but that didn't mean they had to do it to him. He's a hypocrite, okay. Leave him alone. Kirishima's the first to break the silence, causing Bakugou to grunt in his depressed little corner of the table. Killjoy, Denki says. The redhead snorts, clamping a hand to his mouth. Sero joins in, letting Zero out a giggle that resembles that of a hyena, and oh, Denki is so bullying him on that later. Mina, for once, simply sighs, rubbing her forehead. It's that essay on Mido-senpai, isn't it? What the F about it? Denki sniffs defensively, taking a quick glance at the screen. He turns down the brightness, deeming the light from his laptop too bothersome. Nothing, man, it's super manly to vent about your feelings. Kirishima nudges him and titters, though not unkindly. But you're always working on it, there's only so much you can write, right? Oh, leave him alone, Kiri. Let him have his fun and describe how much he wants to watch Mido-senpai from afar as they work on their latest masterpieces. Sero replies for him, batting his lashes and doing a really bad job of imitating Denki. Screw you, Sero. I don't sound like that. Besides, you're the one that was ogling at him a few days back at the training grounds. Care to tell us about what you thought of the view? Denki retorts, face growing hot from embarrassment. He stands up in his seat, pointing an accusatory finger at his friend. For your information, Denki, I was admiring their physique. Sero starts again, squinting his eyes as they face off. His cheeks are a flaming red now, and the electric can't help but smirk at the way he's stuttering. Denki 1, Sero the two bicker back and forth, throwing claims that call the other out. All the while, Denki can hear Kirishima holding in his laughs, masking them as false concerns to try to control the situation. Mina simply shrugs her shoulders, pulling out a ridiculously glittery phone. Emma must have handed that case to her to start recording. And then, because bless his luck, Denki almost has a heart attack. Hey, Kakin and company. That oh so familiar voice calls out to them, causing the entirety of the table to turn their heads. Midoriya jogs up to their seating area and greets them with a ruffle to Bakugou's hair, to which the blonde responds with a flustered scoff, and Denki would comment on that, he really would, but honestly. He's not in a position to say anything. He has his essay sprawled out across the table. FS sake. Mido-senpai. Mina reaches over, practically shouting as she fist bumps the third year and thank Fing God for that because Denki is living for that view of their uniform against defined arm muscles. It's not weird, okay? The greenette chuckles, forest curls bouncing against the curve of his face. What brings you here to our lovely table? Midoriya pouts, crossing their arms in mock offense. Ashido-chan, what's wrong with a third-year support student just saying hi to his favorite hero class? Nothing at all, senpai. It's simply a pleasant surprise seeing you here. Kirishima chimes in, a light pink already tinting his cheeks. I see, Midoriya smiles, sitting themselves down on the seat next to Denki. Now normally, this wouldn't be a problem for the electric blonde. The issue was that his upperclassman crush current hyperfixation was currently seated beside him, and b a certain essay of said upperclassman was right there on his laptop, out in the open, laid bare for everyone, specifically Midoriya, to see. Denki was double-fed. And if things could go any worse for him, Midoriya just had to notice the device on the table, lean over, and ask him about it. Ooh, are these your notes, Kaminari-kun? Triple, quadruple, and quintuple fed. Yeah. Denki stutters, most definitely not lying on the spot. He turned to face the greenette, chuckling weakly as he begged his brain to think of something that won't land him in a heap of embarrassment. He risked a quick glance at his friends, two of which were taking blackmail pictures, one of which was trying and failing miserably to suppress his own blush, and the final one approximately 1 second away from blowing his head off. So much for supportive company. There are notes from your lectures. The electric blonde managed to sputter out, cringing at the way his voice cracked. Really, PBY. I'm not too good at just memoizing things that are said to me, so I figured that writing is the best way to help keep stuff in mind. Midoriya smiles, tilting their head just a bit to reveal a display of pearly whites. He places a hand on Denki's shoulder, which most definitely did not cause the boy to panic. At all. Good for you, Kaminari-kun. It's great that you figured out how you learn best. Actually, that might be super helpful for my lesson today. The support student trails off into a low mumble, words barely audible over the loud buzz of the cafeteria. Denki can't help but stare. Lesson. Bakugou grunts, finally speaking up from his little corner of the table. Midoriya turns, green eyes wide with excitement. We're going over the first of many classes on analysis, and, well, I can't say much about it right now, Kaken, or else I'd spoil everything. It's super interesting, though, that much I can tell you. The upperclassman exclaims, slowly standing up from their seat. Bummer. He brushes himself off, looking around as if he were looking for someone. Wish I could stay longer, but I really should get going before Mirio-kun comes looking for me again, the greenette sighs, rolling their eyes. I'll catch you first years later for class, okay? Make sure to take plenty of notes, Kaminari-kun. Denki should have said something, he really should have, but he didn't. Instead, he just sat there, hand waving limply in the air because oh my gods, Midoriya singled him out in front of everyone else. A small blush crept up his neck, ears feeling a little warmer than they were a few minutes ago. Wire, he whispers numbly, a few moments too late. Smooth, Mina says, jolting Denki out of his trance. DMN Denki, save some. Flirting skills for the rest of us, Sero sneers, letting out another loud snort. Hey dude, it's perfectly normal to turn into a stuttering mess in front of your crush, Kirishima coughs, attempting to be consoling. Bakugou just glares at him. Denki groans, shutting his laptop close and slamming his head into the table. I hate you guys so fing much. Love you too. To be completely honest, Tsuyu had no idea what, or who, everyone was talking about when they mentioned something about the big three. Sure, she could use context clues to figure out why this was such a relevant topic to talk about, but asking around is kind of hard in a busy high school. And yes, granted, she had only been attending at U. For a little under 2 weeks, but words typically spread quickly, right? So how come she's never known anything about the big three? In short, Tsuyu wasn't expecting to find out about the topic of most people's conversation second only to the talk about a certain green-haired support student. Least of all during one of Midoriya's lectures. The class started off fairly normal, or as normal as it could be. 1A was strange in that way, not that Tsuyu minded her class. Midoriya had come in at the sound of the bell, greeting everyone with one of their signature grins. And mind you, the girl wasn't blind. She's seen enough to know that almost her entire is head over heels for their upperclassmen, especially after that enlightening confession circle a few days back, but there was a certain point in time where she simply started to ignore the chaos around her Jiru's songs, for example, or even Minetta's disgusting thirsting the little grape should really be kicked out of the hero course because what the hell. In any case, the lesson carried on, though Tsuyu wasn't sure if her classmates were actively taking part in the lecture or just staring at Midoriya. The support student was in the middle of explaining how to be observant when approaching people with unknown quirks. Remember everyone, looking for physical signs of quirks is your first step in figuring out what kind of power someone may have, the third year said, eyeing the class. He turned around to face the board, picking up a piece of chalk to draw a diagram of a person. The class watched with awe, taking whatever notes they needed to learn the point of the lecture. Midoriya was around halfway through finishing their diagram when a new voice rang from outside the door. Aizu! A blue-haired girl burst through the already open door and threw herself onto Midoriya, causing the latter to lose his footing. The girl was quickly followed by two others, a loud-looking blonde and a not-so-loud ravenette. The scene caused a ruckus, with students looking around in confusion and whispering loudly. Aizawa sat in his corner of the room in that awful sleeping bag, grumbling about keeping the noise down. Neji-chan, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you three be in class right now? Midoriya asks, completely baffled by the guest appearances as he addresses the three students. Tsuyu tilts her head, sighing as a 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 adorable, is whispered by a very infatuated Ima, and to be fair, their upperclassman was cute, especially when he was nervous or flustered. One of the boys, the blonde one, answers for her, slinking an arm around Midoriya's shoulders as they regain their balance, smiling brightly at the brunette, and yes, that most definitely was a blush on his cheek. Well, we had a free PRD and noticed the door was open while we were passing by, so, surprise. A free visit from your best friends. Tsuyu swore she heard growling coming from the other side of the room. Gee, wonder who that could possibly be. A sharp voice brought the girl out of her thoughts, followed by a distinct chopping of air coming from behind her. Pardon my curiosity, Midoriya-senpai, but who are these students you're addressing? It's no problem, Ida-kun. Midoriya turns to face the class once again, chuckling softly as they duck out of the blonde boy's grasp. He holds his hands out, shaking them in a jazz-like fashion. 1A, meet my closest friends here at U, otherwise known as the Big Three. The class let out a collective gasp, turning to each other to murmur in shock. Tsuyu tilted her head once again, resting her face on her hand as she inspected the students at the front. These were the Big Three. To be completely honest, she didn't know what she was expecting. Them being students was a little bit of a surprise. Not a bad surprise, per se, just very unexpected. These are Togita Mirio, Heido Nejiya, and a Majiki Tamaki, Midoriya continues, smiling widely as he introduces his friends. They're in their third year like me, though I'm pretty sure that when they first started out in U.A., they had Aizawa as their teacher. Isn't that right, Aizawa-sensei? The brunette turns to the man, who half-heartedly nods in agreement. Anyways, these three are currently the ones with the strongest quirks at our school, as well as ones with the most potential to become top heroes. The support student beams, placing their hands on a Magiki's shoulders. He speaks again, a small smirk playing at his lips as he brags, I just so happen to be the tech student to improve their costumes. Yeah, you must be honored to constantly be in our presence. Togita laughs, earning him an exasperated sigh followed by an eye roll from Midoriya. In the meantime, Heido starts floating around the class, asking several questions about everyone's quirks and spewing out compliments. I like that lightning bolt in your hair. You must be the Kaken we keep hearing about. Tsuyu didn't have to look at the blonde to know that his face was a flaming red. Wow, is your heterochromia a part of your quirk? Having a lot of limbs must be super convenient. You have a frog quirk. That's so cute. And Tsuyu can't help blushing at the compliment, not when it was so genuine. Once the third-year girl returns back to the front of the room, Midoriya starts again, using the appearance of his friends to his advantage. They finish the diagram on the blackboard, dusting their hands free of chalk. So, as I said earlier, Looking for physical signs of quirks is usually the most efficient way of figuring what kind of power someone has. This is why most mutant-type quirks are really easy to figure out, the support student explains, starting to walk over back to the big three. However, not everyone has these physical indications. For example, if I were to ask you what kind of quirk Mirio-kun has, what would you tell me? A moment of silence passes before a hand is raised, Momo's uncertain voice answering the question. Excuse me if I come off as, too observant, but doesn't Tougata-senpai have a rather bulky build? Does he possibly have a strength-related quirk? Tougata smiles, only to shake his head. Nope. Don't be put down by that, for most people think that. It was a pretty good guess, Yarozu-chan, considering you only looked at physical signs at a first glance, but you have to remember that body types don't always correlate with quirks. That brings me to my next point. A lot of times, you need to see a quirk work in order to figure out what it actually does. Midoriya chuckles, walking over to where Heido was standing. They whisper something into her ear, to which she responds with a fervent nod, and Tsuyu ignores the soft, "I wish that was me" come from Kirishima. Lordy! An electric-like hum comes from the tip of Heido's fingers, barely audible even in the quiet of the room. A faint glow dances around her, coiling up in spirals around either hand. The class lets out a collective ooh as the girl maneuvers the rings, giving a full display of her quirk. And then, as quickly as it had started, the light faded, and Midoriya gave the blue-haired third year a subtle round of applause. Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Nejaya-chan. The support student exclaims, earning them a shy blush from the former. He turns to the class, promptly asking, now, given that you actually got to see it in action, can anyone tell me what kind of quirk Nejaya-chan has? Several hands shot up, students eager to be the ones to answer Midoriya's inquiry. The greenette settles on Eijirou, to which the blonde most certainly smirks with pride, judging by the way Kaminari sulks behind him. Does her quirk revolve around wave manipulation somehow? That would explain the faint light spirals that we could see, the blonde guesses, scratching the back of his neck. Bingo! Heido celebrates excitedly, complimenting the boy before Midoriya could speak. She twirled around, clapping her hands together loudly. My quirk is called wave motion, which allows me to convert my stamina into shockwaves. Up until my first year at UA, I thought that shockwaves were the only form of waves I could manipulate, but thanks to Izu here, the girl laughs, tugging on Midoriya's arm gently, I've learned that I can work with radio and electromagnetic waves as well. You 1A kids are lucky, a soft voice whispers, contrasting the bubbly energy that was Heido. Zuko is really good at figuring out how quirks function. I bet they could get to the bottom of how all of your powers work, just like they did with mine. A Magiki finishes, a soft blush tinting his cheeks. Ah, Tamaki-kun, you're flattering me. Midoriya waves his hands about, grinning wildly as dimples poke into his cheeks. Come on, Mido, Tamaki's only speaking the truth. Tougata booms, interrupting the rapidly reddening greenette. Isn't that right, 1A? Tsuyu should have known to cover her ears. She should have been prepared for it. Her eardrums screamed otherwise as a thunderous totally erupted from her classmates, some even going as far as standing up from their seats. As a flustered Midoriya stutters out phrases of denial, Tsuyu looked at her classmates. Faces were flushed and smiling, painted red with stars in several pairs of eyes. It was a sweet thing, really, to see how infatuated her classmates had become. Tsuyu smiled to herself, looking down at her desk. There was no way in hell that she wasn't hearing about this later. Goddammit. Does this mean we have competition? The F are you talking about, Pikachu? The big three. What about them, Kaminari-kun? Well, all of you saw how they were with Mido-senpai, right? I really don't like where this is going, man. I'm just saying, does this mean the Midoriya Fan Club will have to fight for the #1 spot? I can't believe we chose that god-awful name. Stay on topic, Shinsu-kun. So do we. SHT. I mean, he's got a poi what? No the F he doesn't. We're #1, got it fuckwards. No lame extras are gonna get in our goddamn way. Like I said. Hots. Todoroki-kun, run. F.